Chapter 1778. In the depths of an extremely silent forest, a few young girls were quickly moving through the dense trees, hurrying in a certain direction. It was a group of young girls wearing white night attire adorned with red patterns. That attire was the uniform of the Rossibel Duchy's representative team. In other words, these young girls were the team that had been evaluated as the dark horse with the most potential in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Lai Pa Legion. At this moment, the 5 young girls belonging to the Lai Pa Legion were moving forward in an orderly manner that seemed to be extremely well trained. As they hurried forward, they were also vigilant of their surroundings. From start to finish, they didn't let down their guard. But their expressions were rather calm. From this, it could be seen that this team's evaluation as the dark horse with the most potential wasn't just for show. Not to mention, this group of young girls were contracted by holy elves. One had to know that holy elves were known to be proud and arrogant among all elves. They would choose elves as their masters based on their preferences. Even if their masters were witches, they would only be willing to open their hearts to the purest of them. That way, they would be able to unleash extremely powerful abilities. Thus, as elven envoys whose members had formed contracts with holy elves, the Lai Pa Legion was evaluated as the dark horse with the most potential in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. It wasn't without reason. Of course, the reason why they were evaluated as having the most potential was because of the young girl leading the team at the very front of the Lai Pa Legion. It was a young girl with wavy brown hair and extremely young facial features. The young girl's name was Mira Pazit. She was only 13 years old this year, and was the youngest elven envoy in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Although she was only 13 years old, to be able to represent her country in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Mira Pazit was undoubtedly an elite of the Rossibel Duchy. Moreover, this young girl was the leader of the Lai Pa Legion and was in charge of leading the team. She was only 13 years old. Yet she was able to represent her country in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and become the leader of the team? There could only be 2 possibilities for this. 1. This young girl was only 13 years old, and her talent and strength were both quite outstanding. 2. The elven envoys of the Rossibel Dukedom were generally of low levels. In the end, they could only choose such young elven envoys to participate in the battle. Although the Rossibel Dukedom was only a small emerging country, it was a part of the Holy Wuxia Kingdom. No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible for it to be the latter. That was why Lai Pa Legion was considered the biggest dark horse of this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. However, only those in the know would know. In addition to the above reasons, there was another reason that led to this evaluation. Apart from Lai Pa's Legion, none of the 24 squadrons participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival knew the reason. If you look carefully, you will find it. The girl named Mira Pazit had an azure blue right eye and an amber left eye. A pair of different colored eyes, coupled with the young girl's tender and cute face, added a strange charm to the young girl. However, the young girl's tender and cute face did not carry any emotions, as if she was a doll. It more or less made people feel that there was no life and vitality. It was not an expression that a 13-year-old girl should have. However, under such circumstances, Mira's performance was like that of an experienced person. She was surprisingly calm. Then, after advancing for a distance, Mira used the same calm tone to order the members around her. "We are already close to the enemy's camp. They should have discovered our whereabouts. However, since they are guarding the stronghold, they should not give up the advantage of the stronghold and come out to confront us directly. However, in order to break through the stronghold, you have to use me. So prepare first." The 4 members of Lai Pa Legion nodded in unison. However, they maintained a distance from Mira. They increased the divine power in their bodies and began to advance. Almost at the same time, an unexpected attack came. Fireball. Magic ice arrow. Wind King explosive array. Accompanied by such a shout, a huge fireball, a dense wave of ice arrows, and a violent storm burst out from the depths of the forest in front of them. As if they had grown eyes, they directly bypassed the trees and swept towards Lai Pa Legion's direction. What? The elven envoys of the Lai Pa division were all shocked. "Get out of the way," Mira immediately ordered. Suddenly, the elves of Lai Pa Legion's elves reacted. One by one, they disregarded their image and rolled to the side awkwardly. Bang! The huge fireball, dense wave of ice arrows, and violent storm suddenly fell on the ground where the elves of Lipa Legion's elves were standing. In the midst of the explosion, thick sand and fire were stirred up, and a strong gust of wind was set off, blowing in all directions. The elven envoys of the Lipa Legion, who were in a hurry to dodge, were unable to dodge the blast of wind at all. Their entire bodies were blown away, and one after another, they slammed into the surrounding trees, emitting a muffled sound as they hit the ground. Mira was the only one who managed to dodge the blast with her nimble movements. She then steadied herself and raised her head abruptly to look in front of her. Whoosh! She saw a gust of wind rolling down from mid-air. Above the gust of wind, 3 girls seemed to be riding on it. They lightly descended from the sky and arrived in front of Lipa Legion. Are they really going to attack our stronghold? Looking at their uniforms, they seem to be elves of the Holy Georgia Kingdom or the Russell Bell Duchy, right? Just like Noah said, if we launch a surprise attack at this time, we will definitely succeed. Hearing this, Mira understood. Just as Mira had predicted, the other party had already discovered their whereabouts. However, the enemy's captain also seemed to have predicted that Mira would assume that the enemy wouldn't abandon their stronghold and come out to confront them head-on. Contrary to Mira's expectations, she directly came out of the stronghold and took the opportunity to launch an attack. Ugh! The elves of Lipa Legion, who had crashed into the trees one by one, seemed to have suffered some injuries. They struggled to get up and angrily glared at Claire, Lindley, and Alice. The cunning Austrians. As soon as the words fell, a light voice sounded. In terms of cunning, your country is no less cunning than us, right? Noah stood on the branch of a tree. He leaned against the trunk with his arms crossed and looked down at the elven messengers of Lipa Legion. At this time, the teams that rushed through the night to build their stronghold must be exhausted and resting. Even if we finished building our stronghold, we must have thought that the other teams wouldn't attack and let our guard down. You must have calculated this point and launched a surprise attack, right? The elven envoys of the Lipa division were suddenly speechless. Mira also didn't think that their plan would be seen through so thoroughly, but she quickly calmed down and stood up, shouting to her companions around her. Don't panic. Although the attack was a bit sudden and caused us some injuries, the enemy gave up their stronghold advantage. We will take them down here. Hearing this, the elves of Lipa Legion were all energized. However, Noah laughed instead. Since we launched a surprise attack here, we must have been prepared. We have been waiting here for your arrival since 3 minutes ago. How much do you think we can do in 3 minutes? The expressions of the elves of the Lipa division immediately changed. It was only now that they realized. In a clearing in the forest ahead, the former fairy concubine was dancing beautifully. Under her feet, a dazzling magic array was gradually expanding. Bathed in the magic array, the auras of Claire, Lindley, and Alice's group suddenly soared, and divine power surged out. Seeing this, while Myra's expression changed, the corners of Noah's mouth curled up. The battle has only just begun. Chapter 1779. In the end, the battle didn't last long before the elves belonging to the Lipa division were defeated by Claire, Lindley, and Alice. In terms of battle strength alone, the elves belonging to the Lipa division weren't weak. At least, the other 4 elves besides Mira, together with their contracted holy elves, weren't any weaker than Claire, Lindley, and Alice. As for Mira, she seemed to be a bit weaker than her companions in terms of battle strength. Most of the time, she hid in the back and commanded. Occasionally, she would step forward and fight Claire and Alice in close combat with weapons created by elves' magic. Noah, on the other hand, stayed behind and watched the battle unfold. He had no intention of interfering at all. Therefore, in terms of numbers, there was no doubt that the Lipa division had the absolute advantage. Even if they had suffered some injuries from the previous surprise attack, they definitely wouldn't lose against Claire, Lindley, and Alice. Unfortunately, there was still Fianna on the side of Claire, Lindley, and Alice. Although Fianna didn't go to the front lines, she stayed by Noah's side and performed the ritual dance, bestowing one blessing after another to Claire, Lindley, and Alice, making the 3 girls stronger and stronger, gradually suppressing the 5 elves on the other side. With Fianna's support, Claire, Lindley, and Alice's physical strength and divine aura were always at their peak. There was no sign of exhaustion at all. Coupled with the buff from the ritual god music, It took less than a minute for them to suppress all the elves of the Lipa division, knowing that if this continued they would definitely lose. Mira had planned countless times to get rid of the most important person, Fayanna, but because of Linley's constant sniping from behind, he would be forced to retreat every time he got close to Fayanna. Moreover, even if Linsley's sniping didn't work, Fayanna still had Noah by her side to protect her. Therefore, even if the Lipa division broke through the defense line and arrived in front of Fayanna, they wouldn't succeed. In this way there was no suspense in the outcome. After bitterly holding on for 3 minutes, except for Mira, the other 4 elven envoys of the broken army were all defeated. Their magic stones were taken away, and one by one, they were teleported back to the great sacrificial hall and left the elven sword dance ritual. As for Mira, she was tied up by Claire's whip and brought in front of Noah. Slap! Behind Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice high-fived each other, each holding a magic stone, sharing the joy of victory. On the other hand, Mira, who was brought to Noah, tried to struggle. After realizing that it was futile, she looked at Noah with an extremely calm gaze. "Since you've already won, why don't you take my magic stones?" Mira's voice didn't contain any unwillingness or annoyance. It was as if something insignificant had happened. She didn't even carry any emotions. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice's joy decreased by more than half. After putting away the magic stones, their gazes converged on Noah. Obviously, even the group of girls didn't know why Noah didn't take Mira's magic stones, but instead had Claire tie Mira up and bring her in front of him. Noah lowered his head and looked at Mira, who was tied up by Claire's whip. He stroked his chin and asked such a question. "I'm very curious. Why didn't you use your elven device or even summon your contracted elves in the battle?" After being reminded by Noah, the group of girls also reacted. In the battle just now, Mira indeed only used a weapon refined by elven magic. He didn't use his elven device or summon his contracted elves. It was precisely because of this that Mira, as the captain, had shown less strength than the others in the battle just now. If he had used his elven device or summoned his contracted elves, then the Lipa Legion should have been able to hold on for a while. Perhaps they could have broken through Linley's attack and arrived in front of Fayanna to confront Noah. However, Mira didn't summon his contracted elven device or use his elven device. Even if his companions were defeated one by one, he still didn't use it. This was a bit thought-provoking. "Don't tell me you don't have a contracted elves at all?" Claire guessed but immediately denied her own theory. "No, if you don't have a contracted elves, then the weapons refined by elven magic won't be able to be used in battle at all. Without a contracted elven device, although elven users could use elven magic, the power of elven magic would be pitifully small. As mentioned before, elves residing in the elemental elven world could be summoned in 2 forms. The first was that they had no mass and didn't have a fixed appearance. They could only summon the elves' abilities. They were often used to cast elven magic in their original form to amplify divine might. The second was to directly summon the elves themselves and use the purified form of the elves in battle. When elven users used elven magic, they would usually use the first method to summon the elves' abilities and divine might, and use it on themselves. This way, the power of elven magic would be so great that it couldn't be ignored. For example, when Claire had a contract with a fairy, she could summon a fireball bigger than a soccer ball, and capable of instantly evaporating a pool of water when she used the fireball magic. However, if Claire didn't have a contracted elven magic, it would already be pretty good if the fireball was the size of a fist. Its heat wouldn't even be able to evaporate a basin of water, right? It was precisely because of this that elven magic used by elven users was of the same attribute as their contracted elven magic. Elven magic of different attributes couldn't be boosted by contracted elven magic, even if one wanted to. It was also because of this that if Mira didn't have a contract with a spirit, she wouldn't even be able to forge a weapon for polishing her nails, let alone a weapon for battle. That was why Claire was so sure. "It can't be that there's a problem with the contracted elven spirit, right?" Linley combed her hair and said with some displeasure. "If that's really the case, then it's too unpleasant." "That's right." Alice nodded. "There's a problem with the contracted elven spirit, and they still plan to attack our stronghold. It's simply unwise. Maybe they feel that attacking our stronghold doesn't require a contracted elven spirit." Fayanna sighed. Then we're really being looked down upon. That's right. Noah spread his hands. So, can you please help us explain? Hearing this, Mira lowered her head and didn't say a word. Seeing this, the group of girls looked at each other. Noah stared straight at Mira. After a while, he pursed his lips. Forget it. If you don't want to say it, I won't force you. Saying this, Noah reached out and untied the whip on Myra's body. Then Noah said, "You can leave." This one sentence stunned all the girls present. "Leave?" Claire exclaimed in shock. "You want to let her go?" "It can't be." Lincilii was surprised. "You're not going to take the magic stones from her?" Viviana and Alice looked at each other in dismay. They were also astonished. Even Mira was stunned. She looked at Noah with eyes full of confusion. Under Myra's gaze, Noah laughed bitterly. "Don't look at me like that. Also, don't think that I'm scheming something. I just don't want to attack you." Yes. Noah just didn't want to attack Mira. "Who told you to have a name that makes people unable to be hostile?" Noah glanced at Mira. "Hurry up and leave before I change my mind." After saying this, Noah turned around and walked towards the stronghold. The group of girls was still in a daze, but they didn't raise any objections. They could only helplessly follow him. Seeing Noah's group about to leave, Myra's heterochromatic eyes flickered. After a while, she suddenly spoke. "In that case, I want to make a deal with you." Noah and the others stopped in their tracks. Chapter 1780. Deal. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice all turned their heads and looked at Mira. Deal. Noah was also curious and asked directly, "Tell me, what kind of deal do you want to make with me?" Mira met Noah's gaze fearlessly, and to everyone's astonishment, she said so. "Do you want to defeat Liena Subble?" What? The girls were stunned. Not to mention the group of girls. Even Noah couldn't help but be taken aback as he looked at Mira with deep meaning. "You can't be trying to tell me that you have a way to defeat Liena Subble, right?" As a person who possessed the power of the Dark Elf King and completely controlled this power due to the existence of the world fragment, Lien's level had long surpassed the level of the Elf Envoy. To put it bluntly, with Lien's strength, even without using the Dark Elf King, she could dominate the entire world of elf envoys. It was precisely because of this that Lien was called the strongest sword dancer. Once she used the power of the Dark Elf King, Lien's level would instantly skyrocket to 4 digits, reaching the same level as the Elf King. She would control the world's dark elemental energy, have endless divine power, and her body would be eternal and indestructible. In that case, only the Elf King and his level would be able to match Lotus. Not to mention one Elf Envoy. Even if all of them worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for Lien. Could Mira have a way to defeat such an existence? At least Noah didn't believe it. Mira seemed to know her own limits and directly denied Noah's profound question. "I can't guarantee that I can defeat the strongest sword dancer. But everyone knows that Liena Subble's contracted spirit is a spirit of the dark attribute. If you have my power, you should be able to face the strongest sword dancer much more easily, right?" Hearing this, Noah finally understood Myra's meaning. "So that's how it is. Your contracted spirit is a holy elf, which has a restraining effect on dark elves. If you were to hold the line and suppress Liena Subble's dark elves, would our chances of victory be much higher against that strongest sword dancer?" "That's right." Mira nodded expressionlessly. "My contracted spirit is the type that can only be summoned through a special ritual. It should be very useful, right? So it's a summoning type sprite." Everyone was enlightened. That was because the more powerful the contracted spirit, the greater the restrictions. For example, even the Elf King was afraid of Aster, the strongest sword elf that was more powerful than a mythical level elf. Forming a contract with him required one to pay the price of one's life. One day he would die from the curse. Apart from that, even if he succeeded in forming a contract with Aster, he would need to pay a huge amount of divine might to use the strongest sword fairy's elven magic device. If it wasn't Noah but another elf user, even if it was the 5 elven concubines with the greatest divine power, they wouldn't be able to use Aster's elven device for more than 3 minutes. Only someone like Noah, who had endless divine power and was completely immune to Aster's curse, could fully unleash Aster's power that was comparable to the Elf King's. As for Athena, using this former goddess elven magic device also required a huge amount of divine power. It wasn't any less than Aster's elven magic device. And if he wanted to form a contract with Athena, that was even more ridiculous. Because this former goddess had all of Noah's authority, she could only form a contract with Noah. From this point of view, a sprite that could only form a contract with one elf user had more restrictions than Aster, who was the strongest sword elf. From this, it could be seen how harsh the conditions for a powerful contracted spirit were. This was also the reason why Noah was so sarcastic when Lestia revealed that someone in the Purgatory Apostles had formed a contract with a mythical level elf. As an elf second only to the Elf King, logically speaking, mythical level elves wouldn't even enter the human world. It was even more impossible to form a contract with an elf user. After all, even the highest ranked dark elf Lestia was only at the demon god level. Grey and Vath's contracted spirits were also at the demon god level, but they weren't at the mythical level yet. Even the strongest sword dancer and the strongest elf user's contracted spirits were only at the demon god level. It was obvious how impossible it was to form a contract with a mythical level elf. Of course, since Noah could form a contract with Aster, who was comparable to the Elf King, then other people might have something special that made it possible to form a contract with a mythical level elf. However, even if one succeeded in forming a contract with a mythical level elf, they would have to pay a huge price, right? Unless the other party was as special as Noah, and just happened to offset the price of the contract. As for some powerful spirits, although they didn't need to pay such a huge price, there were still huge restrictions when it came to summoning them. Spirits that had to be summoned through rituals were one of them. In order to obtain great power, one had to spend time making complicated preparations. Myra's contracted spirit was probably of this type. This type of spirit wasn't suitable for a sword dance in a personal battle. However, if there were companions covering for them and the summoning was successful, they would be able to unleash great power. No wonder you didn't summon your contracted spirit in the battle just now. Turns out you couldn't summon it. Claire understood. In the face of such a sudden surprise attack, how could there be so much time for you to prepare a summoning ritual? However, a spirit of this level is just right for attacking a city. Alice also understood. If we had stayed in the stronghold, then you would have had enough time to summon your spirit. And when the summoning was successful, perhaps the stronghold I built would really be breached by you, right? Phaena said in a fit of pique. No wonder you dared to attack our stronghold at this time. It's a pity that Noah saw through this plan, Linley said proudly. Well, it's only natural if that's the case. While the girls were showing their own expressions, Noah looked pensive on the surface, but he was feeling helpless in his heart. Perhaps the summoning ritual type of holy elf could indeed pose a great threat to the dark elemental Lestia. But that was only against Lestia. In front of Lotus, who had the overwhelming power of the Dark Elf King, this level of restraint was completely useless. Moreover, even if she didn't use the Dark Elf King's power, Lotus wouldn't lose to a mere elemental restraint. Don't forget, the trump card of the Holy Roja Kingdom, the elven envoy named Luminalise, was a contractor of the Holy Elf. And didn't that envoy also lose to Lotus 3 years ago? If one wanted to use elemental restraint to defeat Lotus, then even if it wasn't impossible, it wasn't easy to succeed. And this was under the condition that Lotus didn't use the Dark Elf King's power. If Lotus used the Dark Elf King's power, then unless it was a holy elf of Aster's level, it wouldn't be able to do anything in front of such overwhelming power. Moreover, if it was just elemental restraint, Noah could also do it. After all, even though Aster was of the steel element, Athena was of the holy element. With Athena's power, she definitely wouldn't lose to a summoning ritual type of holy elf. If Athena's existence was exposed, then this former goddess would definitely become the strongest holy elf, right? Therefore, Myra's suggestion didn't affect Noah at all. And Myra's plan was also seen through by Noah. You want to lend the power of your contracted elf to us in exchange for defeating Lotus Asubble to form an alliance with us, right? Noah went straight to the point. Then, during this period, the magic crystals we get from fighting together will be divided equally. Is this the deal you mentioned? That's right. Mira nodded and looked straight at Noah. I think that this deal won't hurt either of us. The group of young girls immediately began to show signs of interest. Only Noah scratched his cheeks. In the end, on account of Myra's name and age, he didn't reject on the spot. I need time to think about it. Before that, follow us back to the stronghold. Mira pondered for a moment, then nodded. Chapter 1781. Because the Blaze Division had originally planned to attack the stronghold where Noah and the others were, they weren't too far away from the stronghold. Therefore, it took about 3 minutes for them to return to the stronghold. They came to the center of the campsite and sat around the extinguished bonfire. As soon as they sat down, Mira immediately asked Noah, "So what do you think?" Hearing this, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice all looked at Noah. Frankly speaking, Mira's proposal was actually quite valuable for Noah and his team to adopt. The holy elf that needed to be summoned through a ritual not only had a great restraining effect on the dark elves, but also had a miraculous effect in battles with other teams. Compared to the holy elf that could be summoned through a ritual, Fayanna's Geokius was also a holy elf, but it specialized in defense. In addition, Fayanna had to shoulder the responsibility of performing the ritual and protecting everyone, so she had no extra energy to summon the holy elf to fight. Mira's power was very precious. Just like what Mira said, this was a proposal that did not harm either side. Therefore, the girls could not find a reason to refuse. However, Noah was the captain. The decision was still up to Noah. Under the gaze of the girls, Noah sighed and then looked at Mira. "Sorry, I will refuse this proposal." Mira immediately fell silent. The rest of the girls were all stunned and puzzled. Why refuse? Claire could not help but ask. "I don't think there is any problem with Mira's proposal. The problem is not a problem. At least the entire consideration is not wrong." Noah looked up and looked at the group of girls. "However, I want to say that in my opinion, this alone is absolutely not enough to defeat Lotus Asubble." This sentence made the girls unable to refute even if they wanted to. Although the girls were not like Noah, who knew what kind of power was residing in Lotus's body, the title of the strongest sword dancer was enough to intimidate the elves. As the idol of the elves all over the world, Lena Schubel was so powerful that even those who didn't know would blindly believe her. Claire, Lindsley, Fayanna, and Alice were all elven users who yearned for Lotus. Naturally, they wouldn't directly boast that they could definitely defeat Lena Schubel. "I know that Lena Schubel is very powerful." Mira was silent for a while, then turned to look at Noah. "However, as far as I know, your strength is not weak either. You even have the same sword dance skill as Lena Schubel. You once fought with Lena Schubel for a short period of time, and did not fall into a disadvantageous position. In this way, with the help of my contracted sprite, how could you not defeat the strongest sword dancer?" In fact, the rest of the girls thought the same. If it was just an elemental counter, it would not be enough to defeat Lena Schubel. However, with the outstanding strength of Noah, wouldn't that be a different story? "So, the Russell Bell Duchy also has that information?" Noah shrugged. "However, it is precisely because I have fought with Lena Schubel that I can tell you with certainty that if it is just this, it will not be enough to defeat the strongest sword dancer." At this point, Noah met Mira's gaze. "Unless your contracted sprite is a mythical sprite." "God mythical sprite?" The girls all sucked in a breath of cold air. "Are you kidding me?" Mira also opened her eyes wide and immediately retorted. "If I had a mythical holy sprite, even without you, I would be able to defeat Lena Schubel myself." It was not without reason that Mira would say this. In the ranking of sprites, other than the Elven King, all sprites were divided into low, middle, high, and highest ranks. In the ranking of sprites other than the Elven King, there were also 3 ranks: demonic sprites, demon god sprites, and mythical sprites. Demonic sprites referred to powerful sprites that could not be controlled or dealt with by a single person, and were comparable to a team of elven knights. In the Kingdom of Austria, only the elven messengers with the title of 12 knights who were at the top of all the elven messengers in the Kingdom of Austria could do so. Demon god sprites referred to sprites that could not be controlled or dealt with by a single person, and were recognized by humans as the highest grade sprites. It wouldn't be strange for an elf of this level to destroy a city or even several cities once it was enraged. Even the trump cards of large countries like Versilia, Leola, and Luminaris would not be able to match up to a demon god sprite. Only the strongest elven messengers on the continent, Grey and Vaz, were recognized as capable of fighting a demon god sprite alone. As for mythical sprites, they only existed in the world of elemental sprites and would not appear in the human world. They were terrifying existences that were not recognized by humans. There was only one evaluation of sprites of this level. Match? Impossible. Humans could not match up to a mythical sprite. Therefore, this type of sprite was classified as a mythical grade, meaning that humans could not surpass it. Even if it was Lena Subble, it would be the same. At least that was what all the girls present, including Mira, thought. However, Noah still wanted to say it. I'm not joking with you. Noah looked into Myra's eyes and said resolutely. Unless it's a mythical sprite, it can't even pose the slightest threat to Lena Subble. Noah's resolute words made Mira start to waver. How could that be? Lindley stuttered. Even if it's Lena Subble, it can't be that strong, right? Yes, Alice stuttered. It was rare for her to do so. No matter what, Lena Subble is still a human. How could she be so strong that even a mythical sprite can only pose a little threat? I don't believe it either. Claire shook her head. If Lena Subble can suppress a demon god sprite, then I believe it. But only a mythical sprite can pose a threat to her. Is that possible? That's a sprite second only to the Sprite King. Viviana laughed. How could a human match up to a sprite of that level? Not to mention it's just a small threat, right? Yes, how could a human reach that level? Noah said unhappily. The problem is that although Lena Subble is a human, there's a power in her body that doesn't belong to a human. A power that doesn't belong to a human. All the girls were stunned. In short, if you want to rely on your contracted sprite to deal with Lena Subble, it probably won't work. Moreover, this is only a competition to determine the top 4. It's a bit unrealistic to think of eliminating the strongest sword dancer here. Noah said. However, a ritual-type holy sprite is indeed a powerful force, so let's use another plan. Another plan. Mira suddenly looked at Noah. We can form an alliance with you. Noah suggested. During this period, you need to lend the power of your contracted sprite to us to attack the strongholds of the other teams. In the end, we'll split the magic stones in a ratio of 2 to 1. Of course, we'll get 2 and you get 1. How about it? Myra's brows immediately furrowed. This is one of the biggest concessions I've ever made. Noah spread his hands. To be honest, my contracted elf is a sword elf of the steel element. The elves of the elves in my party aren't very suitable for large-scale battles. If we want to destroy a stronghold that is as sturdy as a city, your elf should be of great use. But that's all there is to it. It's not that we can't do anything without you. That's why you should know what to do. Hearing this, what other choice did Mira have? At that moment, Mira could only sigh. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other and smiled. Thus the alliance was formed. Chapter 1782. In a corner of the quiet forest, a few figures scuttled out of the bushes and arrived in front of a shining barrier. Seeing the shining barrier, Alice immediately said, "It's here. Right now, it's the closest stronghold to us." Hearing this, Claire, Lindley, and Fianna's spirits were lifted. Then what should we do now? Mira looked at Noah. Attack the stronghold immediately? Noah smiled faintly and walked past the group of girls. He walked forward until he was in front of the glowing barrier. Then he turned around and looked at the group of girls. Is there a need to wait? As Noah said that, a dazzling light flickered in his hand and turned into a silver steel sword that he held tightly in his hand. The group of girls immediately understood and looked at each other. Soon after, they lined up in an orderly manner and gently closed their eyes. Mira, who was in the center, began to speak. Loyal knights of the noble Holy King, your swords are the power to eradicate the strong and help the weak. Therefore, I, in the name of the great Holy King, command you to gather on my battlefield. Along with the solemn elven incantation, one of Myra's amber eyes abruptly flashed with radiance. Raise your swords and fight for me, Holy King Division. When the solemn incantation fell, with Mira as the center, the ground began to shine with brilliant light. In the light, one after another, mysterious and complicated magic formations appeared one after another, covering the entire ground in an instant. And in the countless magic formations, bursts of light particles began to float in the air and gradually gathered. Not long after, streaks of light appeared around Mira. They were knights with swords, spears, and large shields. Their bodies were made of light. About a few hundred knights formed an army and lined up neatly around Mira. At this moment, including Mira, Claire, Lindley, Viviana, and Alice, The four of them surged with phosphorescent divine power. Their bodies flashed with dazzling light. Under such circumstances, Mira opened her eyes and pointed forward. Advance! Holy King Division! Under Myra's command, the Light Knights all raised their weapons and charged toward Noah. Seeing this, Noah's eyes flashed and he tightened his grip on the holy sword. Then the attack begins. After saying that, Noah fiercely swung his sword at the side of the barrier. PSA. The swift and fierce sword flashes cut through the barrier cleanly, tearing it to shreds. In front of Aster, who had the ability to counter curses, a mere barrier was nothing. After cutting through the barrier, Noah directly leaped away from the battlefield. Almost at the same time, the knights rushed into the inner part of the enchantment and began to kill. Not long after, within the barrier, a burst of panicked cries rang out. I'm impossible. The barrier was broken in an instant? How is that possible? What kind of elves are these? The elven envoys guarding the stronghold began to let out cries of surprise and panic as they commanded their elves to lunge at the oncoming army of knights. However, under the charge of hundreds of light knights, the elves were all bounced back by the shields. One of the elves was even unlucky enough to be cut in half by a knight's sword and dissipated into the air. That scene made the elves in the stronghold widen their eyes. Noah, who was standing guard beside the group of girls, watched as the elves in the stronghold fought against the knights like mantises trying to stop a chariot. They were constantly forced back, and the enchantments, traps, and elves in the stronghold were mercilessly slashed apart. He couldn't help but nod his head. Then, Noah turned his head and looked in Myra's direction. To be more precise, it should be said that he was looking at Myra's glowing amber eye. That was not an ordinary eye. Although it had the function of an eye, in fact, that amber eye was actually a very rare elven ore. It was called the demon-sealing eye. It was a special eye that very few children in the family that inherited the bloodline of the elves were born with. In that eye, there would often be spirits with extremely great power sealed within it. Mira was one of the elves who had the demon-sealing eye. The elves sealed in Myra's demon-sealing eye were the army elves in front of him that was destroying the enemy's stronghold bit by bit, the Saint Monarch Division. The so-called army elves referred to a contract elves formed by a plurality of elves gathered together. Therefore, when Myra's Saint Monarch Division was released, hundreds of night elves would immediately be summoned to attack the stronghold for Mira. Moreover, the Saint Monarch Division was not only a type of army elves but also a type of military elves. Their level had reached the tactical level, and they could easily become powerful reinforcements on the battlefield. Therefore, in terms of strength, each night elf might not even be comparable to Fianna's Geochius, but together, they could be said to be an invincible elven army. With the strength of the Saint Monarch Division, not to mention attacking a stronghold, it was possible to use them to suppress some weaker demon god elves. However, since it was a tactical level military elf, it meant that it required several outstanding elves to control it successfully. Apart from experts like Maoya who were specially trained to control military elves, no one could control a tactical level military elf by themselves. The other four elves of the Rosable Duchy's Lipa division existed to use Myra's Saint Monarch Division. If they could use a tactical level military elf well, it was not impossible to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. This was the reason why the Lipa division was rated as a dark horse with the most potential. However, because of Noah's surprise attack, the elves of the Rosable Duchy didn't even have the opportunity to use this tactical level military elf, and were directly eliminated. Originally, this way, Myra's Saint Monarch Division would not have the opportunity to use it again. But fortunately, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were all excellent elven users. They definitely weren't any weaker than the Lipa division. This was especially true for Claire and Fianna. One was a descendant of the Elstian family, and the other was a former elven maiden candidate. They were extremely talented in this aspect. Therefore, after a few days of fumbling and Myra's guidance, they finally succeeded in summoning the tactical level military elf that Mira was looking for in the eyes of demons, and used it to attack and occupy a stronghold. If they didn't have the help of the tactical level military elf, Noah would have a hard time dealing with groups of elves and traps in a stronghold, even if the barrier couldn't stop him with his terrifying curse resistance and magic-breaking holy sword. At the very least, if those elves split up and fled, Noah might not be able to stop them all by himself. As for Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, They didn't have a curse resistance like Noah's. If they entered another stronghold, they would only be weakened and very likely become a burden. This was why Noah valued Myra's elf that could attack and occupy a stronghold. With the Sage Monarch division and Noah as his Dharma protector, it was only a matter of time before things went according to plan. About 5 minutes later, the stronghold was destroyed by the Saint Monarch division, and Noah's group obtained 5 magic stones. Cheers! In their own camps, everyone raised the cups in their hands and clinked them hard. In this lively atmosphere, Noah raised his cup in Myra's direction. Today, thanks to Myra's help, we successfully took down a stronghold. Everyone, let's toast to Mira. The young girls immediately raised their cups in front of Mira. Myra's face was full of perplexity, but he couldn't resist everyone's enthusiasm. He could only stiffly raise his cup. This scene made Noah smile involuntarily. Chapter 1783. Without a doubt, everyone had gained a lot during this period of time. 6 days had passed since the start of the competition. At noon the next day, the 7 days would be over. The elven envoys who were still in the forest would all be teleported back to the great sacrificial hall, and the final results would be announced. During this period of time, thanks to Myra's tactical military elves, Noah's group had attacked 6 strongholds in one fell swoop and gained a total of 30 magic crystals. If not for the fact that they had spent a few days training in order to summon the tactical military elves, their gains would have been even greater. If not for the tactical military elves, Noah's group wouldn't have gained so much. After all, just as Noah had said, Aster was a sword elven of the steel element and wasn't suited for large-scale battles. Even if he could rely on his valiant strength to attack the strongholds, if the enemy wanted to escape, Noah wouldn't be able to make them stay. In that case, the magic crystals they gained would definitely be much lower. However, with the Sage Monarch division's encirclement, the enemy couldn't escape even if they wanted to. In the end, all of them were left behind and the magic crystals went into the pockets of Noah's group. Therefore, Myra's contribution wasn't small. Of course, without Claire, Linley, Viviana, and Alice, Myra's Sage Monarch division wouldn't have been able to be used. Therefore, the contribution of the girls wasn't small. As for Noah, during this period of time, he was only responsible for guarding the girls who were concentrating on commanding the tactical military elves. If not for Noah, the enemy elves would definitely have taken advantage of the opportunity to ambush the girls and interrupt their control of the Sage Monarch division, thus turning the tables. In view of this, in fact, if one were to talk about contributions, everyone present had some. However, the Sage Monarch division was under Myra's control, so they still had to show their gratitude. According to the distribution system, we will receive 2/3 of the 30 magic stones. In other words, we will receive 20 magic stones. After expressing his gratitude, Noah settled the accounts. The remaining 10 magic crystals will go to Mira. Does anyone have any objections? The group of girls naturally had no objections. By the way, other than the magic stones that they had to carry with them, the rest of the magic stones that they obtained from others were kept by Noah, who had the strongest strength. Hence, Noah took out his gift card and took out 10 magic stones before handing them to Mira. Mira didn't argue and simply accepted the magic stone. In this way, Mira had 11 magic stones in total, including her own magic stones. As for Fairy Tale, in addition to the 4 magic stones we obtained from the Lai Pa Legion, each of us has 1 magic stone, and these 20 magic stones are our spoils of war. Our team now has 29 magic stones. Noah looked at the group of girls and smiled. Rejoice, my friends. We've already qualified for the finals. Hearing this, a smile involuntarily appeared on the faces of the group of girls, but their eyes were filled with uncontrollable excitement. 29 magic stones. After collecting so many magic stones, Noah and his team would definitely pass the preliminaries and enter the finals. There were a total of 24 teams participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and each team had 5 members. Everyone's magic stones added up to a total of 120 magic stones. In other words, the magic stones that Noah and his team had obtained accounted for a quarter of all the magic stones. The preliminaries would select the 4 teams with the most magic stones and let them advance to the finals. With a quarter of the magic stones, they would definitely be able to secure a spot in the top 4. In the following day, as long as Noah and his team didn't lose the magic stones in their hands, they would definitely be able to enter the top 4 and advance to the finals. How could the group of girls not be excited? As for Mira, it would be difficult for her to enter the finals with 11 magic stones. Noah looked at Mira. Hence, in the following day, if you still want to continue your alliance and attack the strongholds of the other teams to increase your loot, we'll still accompany you. Upon hearing this, Mira couldn't help but be taken aback, and her eyes were filled with confusion. However, Mira didn't say anything. Instead, she remained silent for a while before nodding her head. That's it then. There wasn't any pause or confusion in her speech, and she was just like a machine. It was simple and straightforward, and there wasn't a single trace of emotion in her words. The girls were obviously used to Myra's behavior, and they all gathered together as if nothing had happened, and happily discussed what was to come. However, the group of girls didn't neglect Mira, and while they were discussing excitedly, they didn't forget to drag Mira into their circle, and kept asking her questions. Mira was like a little sister to these young ladies who were pure and didn't have many bad thoughts. She wasn't an opponent who could become an enemy, right? Hence, during this period of time, the girls treated Mira as if she was their biological sister. And this enthusiasm seemed to be troubling Mira. Noah could tell that it wasn't that Mira hated it, but that she didn't know how to deal with it. Regarding this, Noah didn't say much, and allowed the group of girls to pester Mira. Just like this, the sky gradually turned dark amidst the rather joyous atmosphere. Not long after, night fell. In the campsite, the bonfire was burning slowly. At this moment, it was already late at night. In the tents next to the bonfire, Claire, Linley, Fayana, and Alice had already fallen asleep and entered a sweet dreamland. Come to think of it, obtaining the qualifications to enter the finals would definitely let these girls have a good dream, right? On the other hand, Noah, who was in charge of the night watch, came out of the tent and began patrolling. Although there was a barrier in the stronghold, and if someone were to invade, the barrier would definitely react and wake everyone up, there would still be some wild elves and magical beasts that would barge in aimlessly. These wild elves and magical beasts weren't within the barrier's range of defense. No matter what, most of the elves and magical beasts only had the intelligence of wild beasts, and some of them didn't even have any intelligence at all. They wouldn't even consider whether they would trigger the barrier and attract the attention of others. If these existences were set within the barrier's range of defense, the barrier would sound an alarm every few days, and it wouldn't be able to withstand it at all. Hence, no stronghold would set the wild elves and magical beasts as defensive targets. It was precisely because of this that in order to prevent these elves and magical beasts from suddenly attacking the elven users in the campsite, patrolling and night watch were necessary. And this would naturally attract some skilled elven users, who would let their spirits in to investigate the movements in the stronghold. Regarding this, Alice would usually let her contracted spirits out, and let them carry out anti-reconnaissance to eliminate all the elves. This wasn't within Noah's scope of work. Noah only needed to be in charge of patrolling and driving away or eliminating the wild elves and magical beasts. During the patrolling, Noah inadvertently caught a glimpse of a figure in the direction of the lake. That's... Looking at the figure, Noah pondered for a while and finally walked over. Under the pitch-black moonlight by the lake, a petite girl stood facing the wind and gazed into the distance. A pair of different colored eyes flickered slightly, and no one knew what she was thinking about. After a while, the girl's ears twitched slightly, and she turned around and looked behind. There, Noah didn't deliberately make any sound and directly walked over. "It's you?" The girl tilted her head and asked indifferently. "Don't you need to patrol?" "I've already patrolled once, and there aren't any problems at the moment." Noah came in front of the girl, looked at her and asked, "Why isn't Mira asleep yet?" Mira lowered her head slightly. Soon after, she turned her head once again and looked into the distance as she replied with this sentence. "I'm thinking about something." "Is that so?" Noah smiled without any surprise. "Then why don't you tell me?" Mira fell silent. Chapter 1784. The night wind blew around the lake, making the temperature in the air extremely low. That temperature was enough to freeze an ordinary person to death. However, Fayana had set up a cold barrier around the campsite, so that the people inside the barrier would not feel cold. Hence, Noah and Mira were both facing the cold wind, But they did not feel anything out of the ordinary. They did not speak either, causing the surroundings to be extremely quiet. After an unknown period of time, Mira finally spoke. "Why do you still want to maintain your alliance with me?" Myra's words did not surprise Noah. Noah knew that this young girl would have such a question in her heart. However, Noah did not directly answer. Instead, he pretended not to understand. "Why can't we maintain our alliance with you?" "Because there is no need," Mira said bluntly. "You've already obtained enough magic stones to advance to the finals. There's no need for you to continue fighting. As long as you stay here obediently, you'll naturally obtain the qualifications to advance to the finals tomorrow afternoon. Doing so won't do you any good. Maintaining an alliance with me and continuing to fight will only increase the risk of the magic stones being taken away." Mira turned his head and looked at Noah. "If it were me, I would definitely take a defensive position and stay in the stronghold to avoid unnecessary battles." This was why Mira was puzzled when Noah chose to maintain their alliance during the day. In Mira's opinion, Noah's group had no reason to continue fighting. If they continued to fight, it would only harm them and there would be no benefits. The most appropriate measure would be to end their alliance with Mira. However, not only did Noah not do that, he even took the initiative to maintain their alliance. Why would Noah do that? What benefits would he gain from doing so? Because of this question, Mira was unable to sleep and pondered for an entire night. Obviously, Mira did not get an answer at all, so he could only ask Noah directly. Looking at Myra's puzzled expression, Noah could not help but laugh, and instead of answering, he asked another question. "Then why are you still here?" This question stunned Mira. "You just said that if it were you, you would choose to stay in the camp and avoid unnecessary battles to prevent any mishaps." Noah met Myra's gaze. "Then think about it again. If you were in my shoes and your side's combat power was almost completely intact, and you obtained enough magic stones to advance to the finals, while the teammates of your ally were all eliminated. With 11 magic stones in their possession, they were of no value. What would you do?" Noah's words woke Mira up from a dream. A person who has no value, possesses 11 magic stones, has all his teammates eliminated, and can't use his contracted spirit alone. If it were a sinister person, there would only be one thing he would do. Noah glanced at Mira. That's to take advantage of the fact that the other party is still in their own stronghold, and is unable to escape to take them down. That way, they will be able to obtain 11 magic stones. Isn't that a huge gain? Myra's heart clenched, and cold sweat started to form on her forehead. Logically speaking, no matter who it is, they should be thinking of escaping instead of continuing to stay here. But you chose to stay, and you didn't even suspect that we would attack you. Noah looked directly at Mira, as though he was trying to see through her heart. Why is that? That's right. Why is that? Why didn't I think of such a simple thing? While Mira was still puzzled, Noah spoke her mind. Because during this period of time, you have subconsciously entrusted a lot of trust to us. That's why you didn't even suspect this matter. Noah's words directly struck Myra's heart. Since that's the case, in your opinion, are we the kind of people who would abandon our allies who have been helping us all this time, just because we obtained the right to advance to the finals? Mira was speechless. Trust? Not that kind of people. Was it because of this reason that she didn't suspect Noah and the others, and that was why Noah and the others continued to maintain their alliance with her? You didn't even think in this direction. Noah sighed. Because in your heart, these feelings are not allowed to exist, right? Mira fell into silence. Noah had long guessed Myra's situation and values. Demon sealing eye. It only appeared in noble families that inherited the bloodline of elves. A powerful elf was sealed at birth, and it was a very rare and special eye. Because of the existence of this eye, Myra's value was not small. No matter what, the elf sealed in Myra's eye was a tactical military elf. Moreover, it was an army elf type elf. Although the conditions for summoning and controlling it were more stringent, it was extremely powerful. In fact, thanks to Mira, Noah had also tasted the benefits of the tactical military elf. If it was used in the military and political aspects, it would definitely bring about huge benefits, right? Take the Elven Sword Dance Festival as an example. If Mira could rely on this tactical military elf to obtain victory, allowing the Rossibel Duchy to obtain the protection of the Elven King in the next few years, and the national strength would greatly increase. That was enough to prove how high Myra's value was. However, this situation did not make Myra's life much better. Noah had long heard of this. Because there were many cases of powerful elves sealed in the demon sealing eye, the owner would be seen as a dangerous target in most situations, or an item with value, and would be used as a weapon by those in power. Under such circumstances, Noah could almost guess what Myra's life was like. Firstly, it was definitely because of this overly powerful and dangerous power that her parents were afraid of, and then abandoned or sold her. Secondly, since Mira represented the Rossibel Duchy in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, it proved that the one who accepted this girl was the country. For a small country that had just become independent from the divine kingdom of Georgia not long ago, the Rossibel Duchy was far inferior to the surrounding countries in terms of military strength and economic power. It was impossible for such a country to not want to obtain glorious results in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and use it to increase the overall strength of the country. As such, Mira, who possessed the demon sealing, I was bound to be nurtured as a weapon in order to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In the end, looking at the current Mira, who was undoubtedly only 13 years old, but had no emotions like a doll, it was not difficult for anyone to imagine how the Rossibel Duchy would treat her for this goal. It was precisely because of this that Mira was not allowed to have emotions. This girl was definitely in the process of being used as a weapon, and her emotions were gradually taken away from her by others, right? Therefore, facing the enthusiasm of Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice, Mira put on a troubled expression, not knowing how to respond at all. It was also because of this that Mira did not think in terms of emotions, and fell into an unprecedented dilemma, thinking here for an entire night. Unfortunately, the final answer made Mira completely lost. Just like what you said, my existence is only to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Apart from that, I was not given any other value. After a moment of silence, Mira spoke in a low voice. So, the reasons you said, I really can't understand. It's fine if you can't understand. After all, you are still young, and there are still many things you can learn. If you don't understand, just think like before, and that will be enough. Noah looked at Mira and smiled slightly. And personally, I am actually very happy that you did not suspect that we would attack you, and that you trusted us. As long as that is the case, that is enough. After saying that, Noah extended his hand and patted Myra's head as she stared blankly at him. At least, this proves that you still have human emotions and that you are not a tool. After saying that, Noah turned around and left. Mira stared blankly at Noah, who was gradually leaving. After Noah left, she subconsciously reached out her hand and touched the head that Noah had just patted dotingly. Feeling the lingering warmth, Mira murmured, I am not a tool? Chapter 1785. The next day, as soon as the sun rose, everyone came out of their tents and gathered around the extinguished bonfire. Before they gathered, Linley had already prepared breakfast. Although she was a prideful young lady, she was still as virtuous as ever. Everyone sat around the wooden table made of contracted spirits, and enjoyed the sumptuous dishes on the table, eating breakfast in a harmonious atmosphere. Halfway through, Noah brought up the main topic. Today is the last day of the preliminaries of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The competition will be announced at noon. Before that, the teams that have sufficient magic stones should be guarding their strongholds, while the teams that do not have enough magic stones will be frantically searching for their enemies. If everything goes well, we should be able to obtain more magic stones. So let's set off after breakfast. Understood. The girls didn't have any objections at all, and all nodded their heads. Looking at the group of girls, Mira stood up and bowed, which was a rare sight. Thank you very much for your help. From Myra's stiff movements, it could be seen that this was definitely not something this young girl was good at. However, Mira still expressed her gratitude to the crowd with stiff movements and tone. Obviously, the conversation last night had caused some changes in Mira, and that scene seemed to be rather novel to the group of young girls. Previously, we were the ones expressing our gratitude to you. This time it's finally your turn to thank us. Linley seemed to be very happy. Very good, now we're even. You even have to be so calculative about this. Claire was a little dumbfounded by Linley's words. Indeed, you're very prideful. However, Myra's gratitude is indeed very precious. I've never seen it before. Fianna pursed her lips and smiled. This feeling is indeed not bad. So we don't have to be pretentious, Alice said straightforwardly. Just accept it with a grateful attitude. Saying that, the girls' pretty faces were filled with smiles. Although they didn't really care about Myra's gratitude, they should be very happy that Mira showed her feelings for the first time. Right? Mira remained expressionless, but the light in her eyes seemed to be brighter than before. That pair of different colored eyes, under the adornment of that spirit, no longer looked like a doll like before. Instead, they looked more like human eyes. Seeing this scene clearly, Noah couldn't help but smile. He clapped his hands and the girls stopped their clamor. Then let's quickly finish our breakfast and get ready to go hunting. Hearing this, the girls smiled in unison. Under Noah's lead, they increased the speed at which they ate their food. About 20 minutes later, everyone gathered around the bonfire again. The tents in the camp had been taken down one by one and stored into Noah's gift card. Today was the last day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival preliminaries. Now that they had decided to go out and fight, this camp was no longer necessary. Hence, under Noah's lead, everyone gathered together and walked out of the stronghold after putting away the items they brought in the camp. As soon as they walked out of the stronghold, everyone maintained a formation. The basic formation was Alice, who could fight in close range at the front, Claire, who was good at fighting in mid-range at the back, and Linley, who could only fight in long range, ready to support any place at any time. Fayanna, whose fighting ability was lower, and Mira, who couldn't use contracted spirits by herself, were in the center of the formation. Noah stayed beside Fayanna and Mira, responsible for protecting these two girls who could play a key role. Maintaining this formation, under the leadership of Alice's wind spirit, Smoff, the group hurried in the direction of one of the strongholds that they explored yesterday. However, it didn't take long for Noah, who had been following beside Fayanna and Mira, to raise his eyes and stop. As soon as he stopped, everyone stopped as well. Fayanna, who was closest to Noah, asked strangely, "What's wrong?" As soon as Fayanna's words fell, and before Noah had time to answer, Smolf, who was flying in the air at the front of the team, shouted excitedly with a sharp eagle-like voice. Alice's eyes narrowed as she looked at Smoove and shouted, "What are you doing? Ambush!" That one sentence made everyone's body tense up. Almost at the same time, in the surrounding forest, figures flashed out and instantly surrounded Noah's group. What? The girls were all shocked. There were two reasons for the shock. One was the number. The team that surrounded them was not just one team of 5 but 2 teams of 10. The other was the country that the 2 teams belonged to. "You are," Mira said in a deep voice, "the representative team of the Holy Tuya Kingdom?" Taking a closer look, the group of girls who had flashed out from the surrounding forest were all wearing the same uniform. With red as the base and white patterns as decorations, it was the exact opposite of Myra's uniform. Considering that the Russell Bell Duchy was an independent country from the Holy Lucia Kingdom, and had a bad relationship with the Holy Lucia Kingdom, the uniforms of the two countries were similar, but the color scheme was completely opposite. There was nothing strange about it. In addition, the Holy Lugia Kingdom and the Holy Lugia Kingdom both obtained 3 spots to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. There was no need to think about why these 2 teams of 10 would appear together. Teams from the same country acting together? Claire said sarcastically while vigilantly clenching the flame whip in her hand. That's completely different from our country's mode of action. Although the Holy Lugia Kingdom also had 3 teams participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, they would not cooperate. This was because everyone had their own wishes that needed to be fulfilled. The Holy Lugia Kingdom was clearly different. They were only fighting for their country, so it was not strange for them to cooperate. However, is it a coincidence that they ambushed here? Or have we been their target from the start? While the rest of the young ladies were vigilant, Noah glanced around at the young ladies as if he had nothing to do and said so. "I'm quite curious about this." Noah's words attracted a reply from one of the girls. "Don't think too much. Our target from the start was you, the Holy Lugia Kingdom's fairy tale team." Just as he finished speaking, another Holy Lugia Kingdom's elf ambassador spoke with resentment. "Mira pays its demon sealing. I should be our Holy Lugia Kingdom's possession. You actually used our possession to obtain so many magic stones. How could we allow you to qualify for the finals?" It seems that the actions of Noah and his party during this period of time have fallen into the investigation of the divine kingdom of Georgia. Otherwise, these people wouldn't have known that Noah's group had enough magic stones to qualify for the finals. In response, Mira merely looked at the man coldly. My eyes don't belong to your holy Wuxia kingdom. Hearing this, the surrounding elves sneered disdainfully. Your Russell Bell Duchy became independent from our holy Wuxia kingdom. Everything in that country should belong to our holy Wuxia kingdom, including you, Mira pays it. You'd better obediently submit to us. That rude and willful speech made Claire, Linley, Fayana, and Alice's group reveal angry expressions. Then the other party said this. I was originally worried that you would hide in your stronghold before the end of the competition. Now that you've walked right into our trap, don't blame us. Your magic stones and demon sealing eye belong to us. After saying this, the Holy Wuxia Kingdom's elves surrounded Noah's group and started chanting an elven magic incantation. Suddenly, a dense divine aura surged from the elves' bodies, causing the atmosphere to become chaotic. Noah immediately spoke. Claire. I know. Claire hurriedly chanted an incantation. Red city walls that resist 10,000 soldiers, rise up and burn. A surge of flames suddenly ignited around Noah's group. Chapter 1786. Bang! Scorching flames suddenly rose from the ground, forming a wall of fire in an instant, surrounding Noah and his team. It was a fire attribute elven magic spell called Magic Flame Barrier. As the name implied, it was a defensive elven magic spell that created a barrier of fire. Seeing the walls of fire erupting and protecting Noah's group, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom sneered. How can a mere elven magic spell cast by a single elf block an elven magic spell cast by 10 elven envoys? As if to prove the veracity of those words, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom, who surrounded the walls of fire, released their elven magic spell. Suddenly, scorching flames, chaotic waterfalls, berserk tornadoes, heavy rocks, and pure white flashes attacked from all directions, tearing through space and landing on the magic flame barrier. Bang! As an explosion rang out, the elven magic that gathered the 5 basic elements of fire, water, wind, earth, and holy landed on the fire barrier. It blasted apart the fire barrier in an extremely clean and efficient manner, stirring up dense gales and violent flames that swept out in all directions. The commotion was so loud that all of the elves hiding in the surrounding forest were scared away. Like birds and beasts, they fled in panic. Fortunately, the waves of fire weren't strong enough to set the surrounding trees ablaze, and only illuminated the faces of the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom, revealing the disdain on their faces. Generally speaking, most elven envoys who maintained their purity wouldn't have such a blatant display of disgust. However, these elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom clearly weren't this type of person. They seemed to be looking down on their opponents from the bottom of their hearts, making them exceptionally hateful. Sure enough, they're just a bunch of rascals who relied on the power of the demon sealing eye to obtain rich harvests. That's why I said that the people of the divine Roha kingdom are too naive. They actually let a bunch of students obtain the spots to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Since they're noble elven envoys, they should be like us and be tempered by the country like the military. That's what true strength is. That's right. In the end, they're just a bunch of greenhouse-like rookies living in the academy. They can't compare to us. The elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom gazed at the location of the explosions and the berserk waves of fire and mocked without restraint. After all, it was precisely because Noah's group was only students that the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom, who thought themselves to be high above and had undergone strict military training, would look down on them. However, the fact that these people had such a reaction also proved how naive they were. In the next moment, 2 delicate shouts resounded. Dance the scarlet flames of destruction. Ice fangs of ice penetrate the enemy. The clear and delicate shouts made the laughter of the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom come to an abrupt halt. Soon after, surging flames and ice crystal-like arrows intertwined and fell from the sky like a fire dragon and an ice dragon. As they spun, they fell into the encirclement of the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom like 2 thunderbolts. Boom! The moment the dual attack of ice and fire landed on the ground, it suddenly exploded just like the previous explosion. It stirred up layers upon layers of impact winds and violent waves of fire. Like a wave, it surged towards the surroundings. Among them, ice arrows were also mixed in. They were like bullets that were shot out of a gun, shooting out in all directions. Caught off guard, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom could only miserably fall to the side and dodge the shock waves, berserk waves of fire, and random ice arrows. Under such circumstances, the incoming shock waves, berserk waves of fire and chaotic hail of ice arrows all landed on the surrounding trees, blasting them apart and causing them to fall one after another. At this moment, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom stood up and looked up at the sky. There a gust of wind blew. Claire, Linley, Frianna, Alice and Mira were floating in the air as if they were riding the wind. They looked down at the elven envoys from the Holy Luja kingdom. Except for Mira, they all had smiles on their faces. Two careless, elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom. Claire. After Claire summoned the wall of fire, Alice also summoned the wind. Linley. Riding the wind in the air like this, it's easy to dodge your elven magic. Frianna. Even if you release elven magic for 10 people, it's useless if you can't hit. Alice. Hearing the words of the four girls, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom were furious. There was nothing more infuriating than being slapped in the face. Their confident attacks were dodged by their opponents, and they retaliated in the most direct way when they were disdainful. This made the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom, who looked down on the students of the academy from the bottom of their hearts, furious. Damn it! An elven envoys yelled. We'll repay this humiliation 100-fold. However, at this moment, a sarcastic voice sounded from behind this elven envoys. You asked for humiliation. How can you repay it? A chill ran up this elven envoy's back. Puck dash. With a tearing sound, a glittering silver sword pierced through this elven envoy's back, and the tip of the sword poked out from his chest. Ugh! The elf user immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. Then he fell to the ground and fainted. The elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom were shocked and quickly turned their heads to look. There, Noah, who was holding the demon slayer sword, slowly pulled out the elven device from the fallen elven envoys and looked over calmly. You? The elven envoys retreated subconsciously. When did you? I'm sorry. Noah curled his lips into a smile. Elven magic doesn't work on me, so there's only me. There's no need to dodge at all. After saying that, Noah stomped his foot. His figure was like a cheetah as he suddenly dashed toward the nearest elven envoy. You seem to look down on students. I'm sure that being defeated by a group of students with an absolute advantage in numbers, today's experience will be unforgettable for you, right? As soon as this sentence entered that elven envoy's ears, the silver holy sword turned into a dazzling sword light and flashed. Slash! With another tearing sound, the dazzling sword light slashed across the elven envoy's throat, causing them to scream and fall to the ground. If it weren't for the fact that Noah was using the elven device, which reduced the level of materialization, the elven envoys' heads would have been tossed into the air with blood flowing out. Damn! Damn male elven envoys! How can we allow you to humiliate us? You're just a student. Flustered and furious, the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom began to summon their elves and prepare for the battle. However, it was too late for them to react. Slash! 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 Like a ghost in the night, Noah shuttled through the woods without a trace and dashed toward the elven envoys of the divine Roha kingdom. The silver holy sword in his hand turned into the most horrifying weapon and slashed at the elven envoys. Ugh! Oh! Ugh! Amidst the screams, the elven envoys fell down one after another. After twitching a few times, they stopped moving. In the end, a few seconds later, 2 teams of 10 elven envoys fell to the ground and sullenly accepted their defeat. Chapter 1787. The forest regained its silence. In the open space that had once turned into a battlefield, the elven ambassadors from the Holy Roha kingdom had all collapsed and fainted. Claire, Linley, and Alice stepped forward and searched the 10 elven ambassadors from the Holy Roha kingdom. After a while, they all came before Noah with grave expressions. No, we still can't find anything. Claire's tone was full of vexation. We didn't find a single magic stone. Hearing that, Noah frowned slightly. Why aren't there any magic stones? Linley asked in confusion. Could it be that these people didn't carry any magic stones with them? No, that's impossible. Alice shook her head and denied that. If they didn't carry magic stones with them, then after a period of time, these elven ambassadors would be forcibly teleported back to the Great Shrine. It's impossible that they didn't carry magic stones with them. Then why didn't we find any magic stones? Fianna asked in confusion. Could it be because we didn't find any? Just as Fianna's words fell, the bodies of the elven ambassadors from the Holy Roha Kingdom on the ground began to flicker with light. A magic formation suddenly appeared below them and enveloped them in light. In the next moment, under the gazes of Noah and the others, the elven ambassadors from the Holy Roha Kingdom turned into light particles one after another and disappeared under the magic formation. This scene caused the group of young girls to look at each other in dismay. There is no doubt that before these people ambushed us, they definitely still had magic stones on them. However, after we defeated them, the magic stones on them disappeared. This teleportation phenomenon is the best proof. Noah turned his head and looked at Mira. Mira, what do you think? Mira was silent for a moment and then said, I'm afraid that the elven envoys of the Holy Kuria Kingdom had already decided before they ambushed us that no matter what the outcome was, they would place all their magic stones on the remaining team before the end of the competition or before they were defeated and allowed that team to advance to the next round. Myra's words made the girls' hearts tremble. So that's how it is. Claire smacked her lips. These people have already set up a teleportation magic spell on themselves. Are they planning to gather all the magic stones on the last remaining team of the Holy Roha Kingdom? After all, although the strength of these elven envoys is not bad, it's unlikely for them to win in the finals. The Holy Kuria Kingdom should have ordered them to assist the real trump card team, right? Viviana sighed. Without a doubt, that's Luminalise Saint Rachette's team. Of the three parties from the Holy Roha Kingdom, the one with the highest chance of victory was naturally Luminaris's party, who had fought Lillian Asubel in the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. Luminaris was the true trump card of the Holy Teja Kingdom. She was definitely not inferior to Leola of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. Based on the Holy Teja Kingdom's policy of treating the elven envoys as soldiers, it wasn't strange for the other two parties to assist Luminaris's team and help them win. Therefore, before the elven envoys of the Holy Teja Kingdom decided to ambush Noah's party, they should have already decided that regardless of whether they succeeded or not, they would activate the teleportation magic spell on themselves and send all the magic stones to Luminaris's team to help them advance. I thought they were just a bunch of arrogant fellows. I didn't expect to be tricked in the end, Alice said with some admiration. In the end, they're still elven envoys who aim to be soldiers? It seemed that Alice, who came from a martial arts family, had changed her opinion of the elven envoys of the Holy Teja Kingdom. However, that wasn't strange. After all, the Frangelto family was the one in charge of the military of the Holy Teja Kingdom. In other words, we fought for nothing this time? Lynn Silei pouted, feeling rather indignant. What a hateful result. You should be content, Noah said with a chuckle. Generally speaking, being ambushed by two parties of 10 elven envoys from the same kingdom would most likely result in total annihilation. It's already considered good that we were able to turn the tables and defeat them without any casualties. Noah's words made the girls ponder for a while, and they agreed with him. However, it's true that we fought for nothing, Noah reminded. Being entangled by the elven envoys of the Holy Teja Kingdom has indeed wasted a lot of our time. There's not much time left before the end of the competition, and we have to hurry for Myra's sake. The girls nodded in agreement. However, just as Noah was about to give the order to set off, a hand tugged at the corner of his shirt. Thank you for thinking of me. Mira looked at Noah, and her heterochromatic eyes flickered slightly as she said this. However, it's fine to stop here. Myra's words stunned everyone. It's fine to stop here? Noah asked with uncertainty. Do you mean that we don't have to continue collecting magic stones? Yes, Mira nodded and said without any confusion or hesitation as usual. There's not much time left before the end of the competition, and there aren't many teams left. Next, whether it's attacking the stronghold or encountering other teams, it will be much more difficult than before. In the end, not only will we not get anything, we might even lose the magic stones we have. I feel that we don't have to continue increasing the risk. But is this okay? Noah looked at Mira. I think that with only 11 magic stones, it will be difficult to advance to the finals. With all my teammates dead and only one person left, it's already a good result to be able to obtain 11 magic stones. Mira met Noah's gaze. So, I think it's fine to stop here. Noah didn't know what to say. Because even though that was the case, would the Rosabelle Kingdom be satisfied with just a good result? Those fellows who wanted to use Mira as a weapon wanted to win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Not a good result. If Mira gave up just like that, the Rosabelle Kingdom would definitely be furious, right? And there was only one reason for Mira's existence. That was to win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. If this goal failed, Noah could imagine what would happen to Mira. However, Mira definitely knew this, so why would he give up suddenly? As though he had seen through Noah's thoughts, Mira smiled bitterly like a human for the first time. The elven envoys of the Holy Korea Kingdom took the risk to ambush you because of me. If not for your strength, those fellows would have succeeded because of me. You said that I still have human emotions. I didn't believe it last night, but I do now. Mira stopped smiling bitterly and looked at Noah with a gentle expression. Because I sincerely don't want to see you in any danger because of me. Mira. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls were somewhat moved. Obviously, Myra's words, which were full of emotions, impacted them greatly. They had never felt this from this girl before. Even Noah couldn't help but persuade him. I don't think that with our strength anything will go wrong. Is that so? Mira asked. Then what if we meet Lane Isabel, who even you think is unreasonably strong? Noah was speechless. At this point in the competition there aren't many teams left, and all of them are strong teams. There is a possibility of meeting a purgatory apostle, Mira said sincerely. So it's fine now. Noah was speechless. Noah sighed, reached out his hand and patted Myra's head. Thank you for thinking of us, Mira. For a moment, a faint smile appeared on Myra's face. Just like that, the end of the competition slowly arrived. Chapter 1788. Just like 7 days ago when the Elven Sword Dance Festival officially opened, the vast grand sacrificial hall was packed with people. On the altar, the elven concubines who served the 5 elven kings stood side by side in a row with their eyes closed as if they were conserving their energy. They looked very elegant and noble. Clang! At a certain moment, the teleportation circle on the altar flashed with a dazzling light that illuminated the entire grand sacrificial hall, causing the audience to squint their eyes slightly. In the dazzling light, the elven envoys suddenly appeared one after another. Oh! Looking at the elven envoys who were teleported back, the audience around them cheered enthusiastically. This was because the elven envoys who were teleported back until now were all strong players who had not been eliminated until the end. Because of this, these elven envoys were qualified to receive everyone's cheers and cheers. Noah, who was also teleported back, opened his eyes. Before he could confirm if his teammates were beside him, a large number of gazes gathered on him. Noah paused for a moment when he sensed their gazes, and then he scanned his surroundings. He saw that almost all the audience around him were staring at him, cheering and discussing at the same time. Is that the male elven envoys who fought with the strongest sword dancer on the first day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival? That was so exciting, that sword dance. Yeah, I saw it too. I didn't expect that male elven envoys to be so powerful. Moreover, he used the same sword technique as Liana Subble. That's amazing. Similar words were constantly heard from the cheering audience around them, causing the elven envoys of the other teams who were also teleported back to turn their gazes to Noah. Noah raised his eyebrows as he faced the gazes of the crowd. He almost forgot that during the competition, the images of the battles in the forest would be sent back to the grand sacrificial hall by the elven envoys of the gods' parliament for everyone to see. On the first day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah suddenly went to the elven envoy of the Purgatory Apostles and performed a sword dance with Lena Subble. He was also transported to the Great Shrine in perfect condition, right? That sword dance must have given these spectators a great shock. Therefore, the moment Noah appeared, he immediately became the focus of everyone. The enthusiastic cheers and discussions made Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice somewhat bewildered. Claire lowered her voice and asked Noah in astonishment. What did you do to the Purgatory Apostle on the first day? It's nothing. Noah smiled bitterly. It's just a fight, don't make a fuss. After saying that, Noah raised his eyes and looked past everyone at the corner of the altar. Over there, the elven envoys belonging to the Purgatory Apostles were still wearing their black robes. Their faces were completely covered, as if they were trying to reduce their presence. They quietly stood in a row. However, Noah could clearly feel the gazes of the Purgatory Apostles. Some of the gazes were full of anger, some were full of fear, and some were full of resentment. The gaze full of anger came from Wuxia. Come to think of it, at that time, Wuxia didn't have any power to fight back in Noah's hands, which made her very angry. The gaze full of fear came from Lily. After seeing Noah's terrifying strength, this girl from the Elfie clan already regarded Noah as an undefeatable enemy. And the gaze full of resentment came from Sarah. For this extremely prideful witch, Noah killing her without any explanation was probably the biggest humiliation of her life. On the other hand, Lotus and Red Lotus glanced at Noah at the beginning, then lowered their heads and hid their faces under their hoods. No one knew what they were thinking. Noah smirked at the completely different reaction of the group of people. He no longer paid attention to them. At this time on the altar, the 5 elven envoys opened their eyes at the same time. The surrounding cheers suddenly stopped abruptly and disappeared completely. On the altar, the elven envoys all looked at the 5 elven envoys. Under everyone's gaze, one of the elven envoys stepped forward. Now I will announce the results of the Elven Sword Dance Festival preliminaries. Please look at the screen here. After saying that, the elven envoys raised her hand, holding a piece of elven oregon. The fairy emitted a dazzling light and released a screen. It was like a projection that was projected above the altar. On the screen, the results of the Elven Sword Dance Festival preliminaries were imprinted in everyone's eyes. First place. Alpha Empire's Purgatory Apostle Team, Magic Stones obtained 35. Second place. Audiobook Empire's Fairy's Tale Team, Magic Stones obtained 29. Third place. Holy Georgia Kingdom's Saint Knights Team, Magic Stones obtained 21. Fourth place. Duragunia Dragon Duchy's Dragon Emperor Knights, Magic Stones received 15. As for the remaining 20 Magic Stones, Russell Bell Duchy's Lipa Legion team had 11 Magic Stones and was ranked 5th. Unfortunately, they couldn't enter the top 4 and couldn't advance to the finals. The rest of the Magic Stones were scattered among the Elven Envoys who were lucky enough to survive to the end. Naturally, they couldn't stand out. Looking at the results, Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice all cheered and hugged each other. In the High Sacrificial Hall, the audience belonging to the Alpha Theocracy, the Ordesian Empire, the Holy Georgia Kingdom, and the Dragon Duchy of Draco burst into cheers, which echoed throughout the entire High Sacrificial Hall. Under the cheers, the rest of the Elven Envoys who didn't get selected left dejectedly. In the end, only the Fairy's Tale, the Purgatory Apostles, the Saint Spirit Knights, and the Dragon Emperor Knights remained on the altar. Under the cheers of the audience, Noah stared at the rankings displayed on the screen and more or less understood. Sure enough, that little girl called Wuxia also has a tactical level Elven Envoys? If it wasn't for the powerful Elven Envoys that were specially used for war, and could attack the strongholds full of enchantments, traps, and envoys, then the Purgatory Apostles' Elven Envoys shouldn't have gotten more than Noah's team. Unless that unfathomable Red Lotus had some big killing trump card that Noah didn't know about. Otherwise, with the type of Elven Envoys that Lotus had, it should be the same as Noah's Holy Sword. Because it wasn't suitable for large-scale battles, it couldn't guarantee that the Elven Envoys would have gotten more than Noah's team. While Noah was deep in thought, the Elven Envoys on the altar continued to announce the results. Before the start of the finals, we will hold a ceremony to express our gratitude to the Elven King. The contestants who have qualified for the finals will have 2 days to rest and recuperate. We look forward to your most beautiful sword dance for the great Elven King, and at the same time show your strength to the world. After that, the Elven Envoys bowed and saluted in unison. Then, under the cheers of the audience, they slowly left the hall. Almost at the same time, the Elven Envoys under the Purgatory Apostles' Elven Envoys left silently. The Saint Spirit Knights also left under the lead of a young girl. However, before leaving, the girl seemed to have glanced at Noah's direction. Noah knew. That girl was most likely Luminaris. Obviously, the other party already knew who defeated the other two teams of the Holy Korea Kingdom. It seemed that in the finals, not only the Purgatory Apostles, but also the Saint Knights might have their eyes on him. Just as Noah was thinking this, another scorching gaze was cast on him. Noah turned his head and looked over. He saw Leola looking at Noah with eyes full of fighting spirit. After a while, she led the team and left the scene. Well, maybe everyone will have their eyes on me. Of course, this matter would only need to be considered during the finals. Now Noah had one more thing to do. Chapter 1789. On the top floor of a high-class hotel on the Holy Floating Island, in a luxurious room, Mira lowered her head and closed her eyes as she stood in the middle of the room. In front of Mira, near the window, a man in a luxurious suit had his back facing her. He did not say a word, and the atmosphere was heavy. Outside the window, people were still discussing the results of the preliminaries of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Naturally, the people who were mentioned the most were the top 4 teams in the preliminaries. The Purgatory Apostles of the Alpha Theocracy, the Fairy's Tale of Austria, the Saint Knights of the Holy Kingdom of Georgia, the Dragon Knights of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. The man said in an extremely cold tone as he read out the countries and representative teams that people had been talking about enthusiastically one by one. Originally, they should have mentioned the Lipa division of the Luo-Subul Duchy. Hearing this, Mira seemed to have nothing to say and continued to stand there quietly. In response, the man's tone became even colder. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" Mira was silent for a moment before she spoke. "I don't have anything to say, Your Highness." The man in the luxurious suit was the Prince of the Ruzabel Duchy. At the same time, this prince was also the culprit who bought Mira, whom her parents were afraid of, with money. In order to let Mira win in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, he did not hesitate to deprive Mira of her human emotions and implant the mission of winning in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Unfortunately, the dream was beautiful, but the reality was too cruel. Not to mention winning, the Ruzabel Duchy did not even make it into the top 4. They were just in 5th place and announced their honorable exit in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, to the prince, this result was not honorable at all. "Don't you have anything to say?" The prince turned around with a cold smile on his face. "No, you should have a lot of things to tell me. For example, why didn't you win?" The entire process of the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be transmitted back to the Great Sacrificial Hall for all the spectators to see. Therefore, the Prince of the Rosibel Duchy clearly knew what kind of performance the Lipa division led by Mira was capable of. "The first day has just passed. Apart from you, everyone else has been eliminated. That is undoubtedly your fault," the Prince of the Luo-Subul Duchy said coldly. "You chose the wrong strategy. You didn't expect the Odisha Empire's fairy's tale to leave the stronghold and ambush you instead, leading to the elimination of your teammates. That was indeed a mistake on Myra's part." So Mira did not refute. However, under such circumstances, you were still able to win the alliance with Fairy's Tale and prevent the team from being directly eliminated. That is your contribution. The Prince of the Rosabel Dukedom said faintly. "It's just that you still didn't win. Since that's the case, no matter how great your contribution is, it can't make up for your mistake. I only want to ask you." The gaze that the Prince of Luo-Subul Duchy cast on Mira turned from cold to furious. "Undoubtedly you had the chance to win, but why didn't you do so?" Myra's heterochromatic eyes trembled slightly. Because Mira knew what the prince was referring to. The Odisha Empire's fairy's tale didn't seem to be on guard against you. After interacting with those elven envoys for a few days, you had countless chances to steal magic crystals from them, but you didn't do so. The prince's voice was filled with anger. If you had succeeded, with the 11 magic crystals in your hands, you could have even jumped to first place. At that time, our Luo-Subul Duchy would have obtained unparalleled glory. Now the opportunity has been lost for nothing. Facing the prince's anger, Mira still didn't say anything, but she was shaking her head in her heart. Of course, because Noah and the rest treated Mira without any ill feelings, Mira did not have any ideas about the magic crystals on them. But in Myra's opinion, even if she really did so, she would most likely not succeed. Even if she succeeded, betraying the alliance in front of the entire continent and using such methods to obtain first place, she would definitely not obtain any unparalleled glory. She would only be disdained and looked down upon by everyone. But the prince clearly didn't care about this at all. Because of your failure, the Luo-Subal Duchy's plan to surpass the surrounding countries in one go has become nonsense. The prince of the Luo-Subal Duchy was so angry that he couldn't control himself. And because of your failure, my plan to become king in one go has been completely ruined. Acquiring Mira and using her as a weapon in the Elven Sword Dance Festival to obtain victory would allow the Luo-Subal Duchy's national power to increase greatly under the protection of the Elven King, surpassing the surrounding countries in one go. This saying was only used by the prince to deal with other people. This prince was not so kind-hearted to the point of being tired for the sake of the country and its people. The reason why he did this was only because once Mira successfully obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, as the person who nurtured her, this prince's reputation in the country would instantly reach the peak, surpassing the other successors of the royal family in one go. At that time, the current king would definitely appoint him as the next successor to the throne, allowing this prince to obtain the entire country. It was for this purpose that the prince did his best to nurture Mira, and in order to not make any mistakes, he nurtured Mira into a tool. Now all of these plans would be for naught. How could this not make the prince furious? Since you can't even complete your mission, then what's the point of me nurturing you? The prince took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in his heart, and looked at Mira with extreme coldness. So I'll sell you. Presumably, with the value of a tactical-grade military elf, you should be able to exchange for some bargaining chips to fight for the throne, right? The merciless judgment did not cause Mira's heart to waver much. After all, Mira had already more or less expected this result. This was the fate of being a tool. Living in this world as a prop and then welcoming death as a prop. That was what Mira had always thought. If there was anything different in Mira's mind after learning about this fate, it would be that there was still some hope in her. Thinking back to the scene during the competition, when Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice had treated her like their own little sister, Mira prayed silently in her heart. She hoped that before she died as a tool, she could obtain that kind of happiness one more time. As she prayed, a voice that was extremely familiar to Mira echoed in the room. Sell? That's good too. Such a soft murmur made Mira's eyes widen abruptly. The prince of the Russell Bell Duchy was shocked. He turned his head abruptly and looked towards the source of the voice. Then the prince saw it. On the window that should have been empty, a person was sitting on the edge of the window, looking at him with a pair of dark and deep eyes. The prince recognized this person. No, it should be said that he had seen this person's shocking performance on the screen in the Great Sacrificial Hall. It's you? The prince exclaimed in shock. The male elf envoy of the Audiobook Empire? The person who came was Noah. Noah! Mira's expression from the beginning, even when she was told that she would be sold as a tool, finally changed. Why? Ignoring Mira's shock, Noah looked at the prince of the Russell Bell Duchy, his voice emotionless. You just said that you want to sell Mira, right? Only then did the prince of the Russell Bell Duchy react. He calmed himself down and nodded. Do you have any objections? If you're referring to my objections, I do have a lot to say and a lot to do. But that's too troublesome. I can't be bothered to talk so much with you. Noah glanced at the prince of the Russell Bell Duchy. Since you want to sell Mira, then name a price. What? The prince of the Russell Bell Duchy was stunned. As for Mira, she was stunned on the spot. Chapter 1790. In that instant, the entire luxurious room fell silent. Mira couldn't believe her ears as she looked at Noah in bewilderment. Noah, you? Before Mira could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by Noah. All right, Mira, don't say anything. Noah smiled at Mira. Leave the rest to me, Yizichin said. Hearing that, Mira opened her mouth, but when she saw the smile on Noah's face, she obediently closed her mouth and nodded, choosing to remain silent. Looking at the interaction between Noah and Mira, and then recalling the relationship that the two of them had more or less shown during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the prince of the Russell Bell Duchy had a thought. After a while, the prince smiled faintly. Noah Dole, could it be that you want to buy the demon sealing eye from me? Only talking about the demon sealing eye, and not Mira, proved that in the heart of this prince, Mira's existence was dispensable. The only thing that he truly valued was the demon sealing eye. To this, Noah only gave a short reply. That's right, name a price. The short reply caused the Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy to swallow most of the words he had prepared in his heart, unable to say them. From those words one could tell that Noah didn't want to talk to him at all. A mere elven envoy actually dared to treat a prince of a country with such an attitude. This would only give rise to one feeling. That was, the other party didn't even put this prince in his eyes. The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy couldn't help but feel some anger in his heart. However, as a member of the Wang family, this prince wasn't at the level where he couldn't control his emotions. Thus, the prince forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart, and the smile on his face became a little unsightly. Since you've seen the power of the Demon Sealing Eye's tactical-grade military elven during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, then you should know that it isn't that easy to buy it with the wealth of an elven envoy, right? A tactical military sprite was a precious military resource even in those big countries. Therefore, even though most of the elven envoys were from noble families, it was still very difficult for them to afford a tactical military elf. At least, as far as the Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy knew, other than the royal family, the only ones who could afford tactical military elves were the 4 major nobles. Coincidentally, 3 of the 4 great nobles of the Austro-Hungarian Empire were related to Noah. The 3 great nobles were Elstian, Laurenfrost, and Frangelto. Coincidentally, it was the family that Claire, Linley, and Alice were from. As for Phaeana, she was the 2nd princess of the kingdom. She belonged to the royal family and had a higher status than the 4 noble families. From the looks of it, if Noah's teammates were to make a move, it wasn't impossible for them to obtain a tactical military elf. But as far as I know, the Elstian family has already declined, and their title has been stripped. The 2nd princess of the kingdom is also no longer valued by the royal family because of the lost elven concubine. Although the remaining Laurenfrost and Frangelto families still have power, they shouldn't be willing to spend a large sum of money to buy a tactical military elf just because of the request of a few juniors, right? The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy said with assurance. Then what do you plan to use to complete this deal with me? The prince's words made Noah frown slightly. Seeing this, the Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy thought that he had made things difficult for Noah, who knew that in the next moment Noah would directly say this. You don't have to worry about how I should do it. Just give me a price and don't talk so much nonsense. You. The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy was enraged, and his breathing became hurried. He suppressed his anger and spoke while gritting his teeth. All right, since that's the case, I'll be direct. I don't need you to give me anything valuable. However, you have to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and help me make a wish in front of the Elven King. If that's the case, I'll give you the Demon Sealing Eye. The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy's intentions were finally exposed. That's right, this prince wanted to obtain the Elven King's wish. Apart from obtaining the protection of the Elven King, those who obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival would also be able to obtain a wish from the Elven King. With the elimination of the Lipa division, the previous plan had gone down the drain. If the Prince of the Rosabelle Duchy wanted to achieve his wish to sit on the throne, relying on this wish was undoubtedly the fastest way. As long as Noah obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and helped him make the wish of obtaining the throne, this prince's ambition would be able to succeed. This was why this prince had said so much nonsense to pave the way. Noah was able to fight head-on with Lena Subble on the first day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival without losing. Such an elven envoy could definitely obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. That was why the Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy had offered such a condition when Noah requested for Mira. Unfortunately, this prince clearly didn't know that his wishful thinking was very good. The man in front of him had an unimaginably bad impression of him. Thus, Noah looked deeply at the Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy and sighed. If you put away your boring ambition and scheming heart, and honestly state a price, then I'll forget about it. This is your last chance. What? The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy was slightly startled, and then his expression darkened. What do you mean by this? You still don't understand. Noah raised his eyes and looked at the prince. I thought you were a smart person. Looks like you're destined to be unpresentable. Since you don't know what's good for you, then I'll make sure you don't get anything. The Prince of the Russell Bell Duchy was finally enraged. However, before this prince could fly into a rage, Noah curled his lips and smiled. Listen carefully. If I can really obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and obtain a wish, then I definitely won't use it to make any deal with you. Instead, I'll directly make a wish for the Russelbell Duchy to release Mira Pacet or for the Russelbell Duchy to disappear. That way I'll be able to achieve my goal. Do you understand? The anger in the prince's heart was instantly extinguished by a basin of water, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. You're actually willing to do this for Mira Pacet? The prince of the Russelbell Duchy said with a shocked expression. Why? Is there a reason? Noah looked at the prince and his tone was merciless. It's very simple. I don't like you. Since we both need a wish to achieve our goal, then do you think I'll choose a method that benefits you? You. The prince of the Russelbell Duchy was trembling with anger. You're just an elven envoy. How dare you speak to the prince of a kingdom like this? Aren't you afraid that Afraid of what? You'll go to the Audiobook Empire and sue me? Say that I have to be punished for threatening you? Otherwise, the diplomatic relations between the Audiobook Empire and the Russelbell Duchy will be strained? Noah said with a smile that wasn't a smile. What gave you the confidence to think that the Audiobook Empire would punish an elven envoy who obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival for a small kingdom? The prince of the Russelbell Duchy froze in place. That's right. To the Audiobook Empire, the Russelbell Duchy was just a small kingdom that wasn't worth their attention. As for Noah, he was able to obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. He was an elven envoy that could bring great benefits to the kingdom. Under such circumstances, would the Audiobook Empire care about the complaints of the Russelbell Duchy? At that time, in order to not offend the Audiobook Empire, the royal family of the Russelbell Duchy might even throw this prince into the cold palace. Only then did the prince realize what was going on. In front of Noah, he didn't have any sense of superiority. Thus, the prince slumped his shoulders in defeat. Seeing this, Mira knew. She had decided where she belonged. Chapter 1791. In the end, in order to prevent Noah from being disgusted by him, he made such a cruel wish when he won the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In the end, the prince of the Russelbell Duchy didn't even dare to offer a price to Noah. He directly transferred Mira's ownership to Noah as if he was trying to curry favor with him. In other words, this prince had given away the tactical military sprite in a way that did not require anything in return. That was enough to be condemned as a prodigal son by others. Even if he was a prince, the Russelbell Duchy was still a small country. Giving away a tactical-level military elf just like that was a prodigal act no matter how one looked at it. However, this was also a way to avoid disaster, right? If he didn't take advantage of this time to change Noah's impression of him, the prince of the Russelbell Duchy had a premonition that if Noah really won the Elven Sword Dance Festival, he definitely wouldn't mind making the wish he mentioned before. Since that was the case, he might as well use this method to sell a favor. Although this favor wouldn't be taken to heart by Noah at all. Just like that, Mira officially left the Russelbell Duchy and was brought back by Noah. After that, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls who found out about this matter were shocked that Noah had done something incredible, but also very happy to accept Mira. Thinking about it, the girls were also very worried about Mira's situation before, right? Therefore, although Noah's actions were unexpected, he received the approval of the girls. However, when it came to the arrangement for Mira, Noah was a little troubled. No matter what, Mira was bought back by Noah from the Russelbell Duchy in a high-profile manner. However, Noah really didn't consider how to arrange Mira after buying her back. In the end, Noah still decided to temporarily arrange for Mira to enter the Alessia Elven Academy. With Mira's aptitude and the fact that she was a tactical military elf in the eyes of the Demon Sealer, Vath and Grey would most likely accept such an outstanding student without hesitation, right? And with Greyvath's protection, Noah didn't need to worry about anyone in the Wuxia Empire targeting Mira's military elves, which would be disadvantageous to her. At this point, Mira's matter came to an end. However, what Noah did not expect was that as soon as he settled Mira's matter, the person he had just mentioned in his mind appeared. Should I congratulate you on passing the preliminaries? In the tower at the center of the floating island in Noah's room, Greyvath openly barged into his room and said this as soon as she barged in. Noah, who was thinking about making arrangements for Mira, was stunned by this heroic scene. After a while, he narrowed his eyes. Why are you here? Can't I be here? Gray and Vath said without any change in expression. During the Elven Sword Dance Festival, even the Holy Realm is open to ordinary people, right? In other words, you're here to be a spectator? Noah sighed. Stop lying. The Elven Sword Dance Festival will also be broadcasted live to the major countries in the human world. Even if you wanted to watch it live, you could have come with us when we set off. What's the point of delaying it until now? At that time, you were only here to participate in the competition. You didn't even qualify for the finals. There's no point in watching that level of competition, Gray and Vath said mercilessly. Apart from the short confrontation between you and Lotus, the rest of the competition isn't worth watching. As expected of the existence known as the strongest elven user on the continent, the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 24 years ago. You're really something. Noah knew that there was no point in continuing to talk nonsense with Gray and Vath, so he decided to lay his cards on the table. Alright, just say what you want to say. You're the one who asked me to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Don't tell me you don't have your own motives. Until now, Noah still didn't understand why Gray and Vath had tried so hard to get him to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Although Noah had thought at the beginning that Gray and Vath simply wanted to get the protection of the Elven King, or to achieve something through Noah, it didn't seem to be the case now. Gray and Vath definitely had some other plans. Noah was absolutely sure of that. Perhaps Gray and Vath had seen through Noah's thoughts, but they let out a rare bitter laugh. Alright kid, don't look at me like that. I didn't ask you to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival for any other reason. If I have to say it, I just wanted you to stop some people from achieving their goals. Stop some people from achieving their goals? Noah frowned slightly. Are you referring to Lotus? No. Gray and Vath looked straight at Noah. Lotus isn't dangerous. The truly dangerous person is that person called Red Lotus. Noah's eyes flickered upon hearing Gray and Vath's words. Gray and Vath spoke as expected after seeing Noah's reaction. It seems like you've also noticed that the elven user isn't simple. Not simple. Indeed not simple. How could a guy who could remain unfazed when Noah and Lotus unleashed their full power be a simple person? But in terms of strength, even if that elven user is comparable to Lotus, he can't be considered more dangerous than her, right? Noah looked at Gray and Vath. Lotus is terrifyingly powerful. Of course, I know that Lotus is terrifyingly powerful. After all, I've been with her for a whole year. So, I know that Lotus has long surpassed me in my prime. She possesses strength that is on a completely different level from humans. Gray and Vath calmly analyzed. But Lotus's purpose is to have a showdown with you. This purpose isn't dangerous at all. Noah understood what Gray and Vath meant. You mean? Noah asked with uncertainty. What dangerous purpose does that Red Lotus elf user have? I don't know. Gray and Vath answered simply. However, that person appeared in the Alphys Empire out of thin air, and reached some agreements with the higher-ups of the Alphys Empire. Using the funds provided by the Alphys Empire, he purchased a large number of tactical military elves. He even recruited a group of powerful elves under his command, including the orphans of the academy. He purchased a large number of tactical military elves and recruited a large number of elven users. Noah frowned deeply. What does that person want to do? I'm not sure. Gray and Vath shook her head and then looked at Noah. There's only one thing that I'm sure of. That is, with these preparations it's completely enough to start a war. Noah suddenly fell silent. Recalling the scorching aura and frosty temperament of the other party, Noah felt that it wasn't strange at all if such a person wanted to start a war. Just like what Gray and Vath said. Red Lotus gave off a dangerous vibe. It didn't mean that the other party was more powerful than Lotus, but that the other party had some extremely terrifying thoughts in her heart. Why would such a person want to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival? Where did she come from? If she wins just like that, what will happen? Gray and Vath closed her eyes. When I think of this, I can't sit still. That person gives me a very dangerous vibe. That's the purpose of you letting me participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah more or less understood. To prevent such a dangerous person from obtaining the right to fulfill her wishes? That's right. If such a person obtains the right to fulfill her wishes, it might really cause irreversible consequences. Not to mention, that person has so many connections with the Alpha Empire, which has a lot of negative rumors. Gray and Vath's face tensed up. And your appearance has given me hope to stop that person. Hearing this, Noah fell into deep thought. It was not until this moment that Noah had a question. Why would Lotus get involved with such a dangerous person? Why did the two of them end up together? Was there a bigger inside story behind this? It's up to you to decide how to deal with such a person. Gray and Vath said as Noah fell into deep thought. I only have one request, and that is to defeat her. Noah nodded lightly. Chapter 1792. Night gradually fell. Noah came out of his room and prepared to go to the place where the girls in the team were, and have dinner with them. In the end, after thinking so much, I still can't figure out the purpose of the elf messenger named Red Lotus. Even her identity seems so mysterious. According to Gray and Vath, the first time they noticed the existence of Red Lotus was a very accidental situation. It was mentioned before that the merchants of the Skeleton Alliance would often sneak into the Academy City where the Elven Academy was located and sell spell engravings to some students who were thirsty for power. As the Dean of the Elven Academy, Gray and Vath naturally wouldn't turn a blind eye to this matter. Therefore, they had been arranging for people to monitor the movements of the Skeleton Alliance. And the base of the Skeleton Alliance was in the Alpha Theocracy. In the process of monitoring the Skeleton Alliance, Gray and Vath discovered the existence of Red Lotus. She even found out that she was wantonly purchasing military elves through the channels of the Skeleton Alliance. She inquired about the location of those lonely and helpless elf messengers, and recruited them under her command. From the actions of Red Lotus, Gray and Vath found something wrong, so they had been paying attention to the movements of Red Lotus. It was under such circumstances that Gray and Vath got the information that Red Lotus was preparing to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Gray and Vath, who were keenly aware that something terrible would happen if such a dangerous person won the Elven Sword Dance Festival, finally began to feel nervous. Therefore, later on, the appearance of Noah made Gray and Vath have the idea of training him and letting him participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival to stop Red Lotus. In addition, Gray and Vath also found out that Red Lotus and Lotus were secretly in contact. However, Gray and Vath did not expect that Lotus would actually walk together with Red Lotus, and even attend the sword dance of the fairies as a representative of the Alpha Theocracy. 4 years ago, the Academy was destroyed due to some unknown incident. Lotus escaped from that place and met me. She spent the next year with me and didn't know anyone other than me. However, after the Fairy Sword Dance Festival ended 3 years ago, Lotus mysteriously disappeared. Even though I sent people everywhere to look for news of Lotus, I still couldn't find her whereabouts. It was only when Lotus broke into the Academy and fought with you that I saw her again. I don't know who Lien has been with and what kind of life she has been living in the past 3 years. If even I can't get any information, it proves that Lien's whereabouts have been deliberately hidden by someone. Perhaps Hong Lien is one of the reasons. The above information was told to Noah by Gray and Vath. This made Noah feel that this matter was very strange. He still remembered that Lotus told Noah this when they met in the academy because of Versilia's matter. An acquaintance told me that Versilia Eva Farangelto might have transplanted the spell rune, and it was because of me. Gray and Vath said that after coming out of the academy, until the end of the Fairy Sword Dance Festival, Lotus only had contact with her and didn't know anyone else. So where did this so-called acquaintance come from? Moreover, Lotus also said that the reason why she knew that Versilia might have transplanted the spell rune was because her acquaintance told her that Versilia had been in contact with the people of the Skeleton Alliance. Therefore, Noah had reason to believe that the so-called acquaintance was referring to Hong Lien. After all, Hong Lien had a very deep relationship with the Skeleton Alliance, so it wasn't strange for her to know such news. And if the acquaintance that Lotus was talking about was Hong Lien, then Hong Lien's identity was a little thought-provoking. I remember that Lotus once said that her acquaintance happened to have an extraordinary relationship with Claire and Friana. Noah stroked his chin as he walked forward. Her aura is scorching hot, and she has an extraordinary relationship with Claire and Friana? Noah felt that he seemed to have grasped the key to pointing out Hong Lien's true identity. In addition, Losti also mentioned that Hong Lien seemed to have formed a contract with a mythical elf. This made Noah's mind flash, and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. It can't be. Noah couldn't help but murmur. Could it be that Hong Lian is that person? If it was really as Noah thought and Hong Lian was that person, then it wouldn't be a joke. Not to mention other things, if people knew that this person actually participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival openly and appeared in front of everyone, it would definitely cause an unimaginable uproar. Especially the House of Gods and the Ordisia Empire, they might directly interfere in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and attack Hong Lian. But that's not right. Noah frowned. If Hong Lian is really the person I think she is, then why would she participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival? The Elven Sword Dance Festival was actually a large-scale ceremony to offer sacrifices to the Elven King. Elven envoys from all over the continent would perform sword dances during the ceremony, and the most beautiful sword dance would be presented to the Elven King. That was the most fundamental purpose of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In other words, the Elven King would be watching the entire process of the competition. If Hong Lian was really the person Noah thought she was, then the Elven King wouldn't let her participate, right? Or, even the omnipotent Elven King doesn't know Hong Lian's true identity. Noah felt as if he had found the vine that would lead him to the location of the melon. If Noah were to follow this vine, he would be able to reveal the biggest secret of the Elven Sword Dance Festival to Noah. However, he still couldn't find the location of the melon. Therefore, it was still a long way to go if he wanted to follow the vine to the melon. However, if it's really as I think and Red Lotus is that person, then we have to consider whether or not we should let Claire and Fianna face her in the finals, or even let them meet. Thinking of this problem, Noah's expression became more or less dignified. At this moment, a voice sounded from behind Noah. "What are you thinking about here alone?" The sudden voice startled Noah. He turned his head and subconsciously looked behind him. In the next second, Noah was stunned and cried out in surprise. "Why is it you?" The person who appeared behind Noah was a young lady with shoulder-length black hair, and a beret with a flying dragon emblem on her head. She exuded a strict temperament. She was the trump card of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, the leader of the Dragon Emperor Knights Leola Lancaster. "You didn't notice my presence even when I got so close?" Leola looked straight at Noah. This isn't the performance of a powerful elven envoy, who is on par with Lyanna Subble. Noah could clearly hear the dissatisfaction in Leola's words. It was a straightforward emotion that one would only have when one's favorite opponent didn't perform as well as one had imagined. Of course, Noah was indeed too focused on thinking and didn't notice Leola's approach. However, that also proved that Leola didn't approach Noah with any evil intentions. If Leola approached Noah with clear hostility, malice, and killing intent, Noah's sensing ability would have reacted, and it would be impossible for him not to notice Leola. However, Noah didn't purposely explain and continued to ask, "Why are you here? Why do I feel like I'm being perfunctory?" Leola furrowed her beautiful brows, but soon she didn't care anymore. "I'm here to look for you." "Look for me?" Noah raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you want to have a fight with me again? That might not be a bad idea, but compared to having a private fight with you here, I'd prefer to have a fair fight with you in the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival." Leola didn't hide her thoughts at all. "Before that, let's forget about the private fight." "Is that so?" Noah shrugged. "But who knows when the dragon's blood will awaken again?" "Don't worry, I've already fought enough during the preliminaries. The dragon's blood will only awaken when my thirst for battle is stronger. My thirst for battle hasn't reached that stage yet." Leola looked at Noah and the corners of her lips curled up. "There's only one thing I'm sure of, and that is the dragon in my body is thirsting for a fight with you." In other words, if there was a chance, Leola would definitely challenge Noah. Chapter 1793. Even though they hadn't known each other for a long time and had only met 2 to 3 times, Noah more or less understood Leola Lancaster. In simple terms, she was a person who was loyal to her instincts. While being a knight, Leola was also a warrior. Perhaps due to her identity as a dragon servant, Magus G. This knight-come-warrior was as competitive as a fierce dragon, and was loyal to her instincts. To this young lady, the happiest thing was to be able to find a worthy opponent, right? And it was very obvious that Noah was a worthy opponent in the eyes of this Duke Dragon. Moreover, during the awakening of the dragon blood, Noah had also gotten rid of Leola in a straightforward manner. That situation must have made Leola even more excited, right? In the beginning, my goal was to fight the strongest sword dancer. But now, compared to Lienasubble, I hope to fight you more. Leola looked at Noah with a burning gaze. I hope that during the sword dance of the elves, you can calm the hot blood in my heart and satisfy the thirst of the dragon in me. Let's hope so, Noah said as if he didn't see Leola's burning gaze, avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial. So, why are you looking for me? You can consider it as something. The burning battle intent in Leola's eyes calmed down bit by bit. Her gaze didn't leave Noah as she spoke. Before that, I'd like to ask you a question. Noah didn't speak and silently signaled for Leola to continue. Shortly after Leola spoke. Noah Doria, who exactly are you? This question stunned Noah. Noah didn't expect Leola to ask such a question. What do you mean by who exactly am I? Noah blinked. Didn't the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia already investigate my background? It's because of that we realize that there are a lot of mysteries surrounding your identity, Leola said. To put it bluntly, before you appeared in the Alicia Elf Academy in the Alicia Empire, we didn't get any information at all. Where are you from? Who are your parents? Where did you live before? Leola stared straight at Noah. We didn't even manage to find out the slightest bit of such basic information. It's just too strange. It's as if you didn't even exist in this world before you appeared in Alicia Elven Academy. Leola was right. Before that, Noah didn't exist in this world. Therefore, no matter how hard the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia investigated, they couldn't find any information about him. I think it's not just the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. The other countries who are investigating you are also puzzled by this strange phenomenon, right? Leola glanced at Noah. Although we suspected that the Alicia Empire might have deliberately concealed information about you and erased all traces of your past, if that's the case, they might as well erase all traces of you before the Elven Sword Dance. There's no reason for them to only erase traces of you before you entered the Alicia Elf Academy. And then, Noah did not deny or admit it, but asked this question. What are you trying to say? There's only one thing I want to say. Leola stared at Noah and said word by word. That is, whether or not you are an elven envoy of the Ordesian Empire. Oh! Noah seemed to have guessed the purpose of Leola's visit. He immediately smiled. If I say no, what are you going to do? It's simple. Leola shifted her gaze to Noah. Noah Doloa, join us, the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. When these words came out of Leola's mouth, Noah thought to himself, as expected. At this point, Leola's intentions were clear. This girl was here to poach. To be able to fight on par with the strongest sword dancer. There's no doubt about how outstanding you are as an elven envoy, Leola said. We, the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, have taken a liking to your abilities and talents. We believe that you are one of the most outstanding elven users on the continent. If we can use this ability of yours, it will greatly increase our influence. On top of that, you are the second male elven user in history. Therefore, your genes may even improve the quality of our elven users. That is what we believe. Gene? Noah was stunned. In other words, the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia wasn't only targeting Noah, but also his descendants? What's so strange about that? Leola said matter-of-factly. Elven envoys rely on maintaining outstanding bloodlines to pass down their legacies. It's not strange for our country to take a liking to your bloodline, right? In that case, it wasn't wrong either. The strength of shamans would continuously decline after the age of 25, and eventually lose their powers. After losing their powers, shamans would mate with pure-blooded nobles and give birth to even more outstanding descendants. Due to this reason, most of the elf envoys were of noble birth. They were basically the descendants of the nobles of various countries. Judging from this point, it wasn't strange for Noah's bloodline to be targeted. Normally, elf envoys would mate with pure-blooded nobles in order to maintain their bloodline. However, no matter how pure their bloodline is, those nobles are only ordinary people. They aren't elf envoys who can communicate with elves, Leola said bluntly. Under such circumstances, with someone like you who can compete with the strongest sword dancer, and the only male elf envoys on the continent, there are many who want to mate with you and give birth to even more outstanding descendants. The Dragon Duchy of Doragonia was one of them. That was what Leola was trying to say. So, if you aren't a member of the Audiobook Empire and haven't been recruited by them, then come to our Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, Leola said straightforwardly. Trust us. We can definitely give you more than the Audiobook Empire. Of course, you have to pledge your loyalty to our country and leave your descendants behind. Noah was speechless. No, it wasn't just speechlessness. Noah almost choked on his breath. Leave your descendants behind? Was there a need to be so direct? Noah said straightforwardly. In other words, you're proposing to me, right? His words made Leola, who had been extremely calm since the beginning, open her eyes wide. Then her pretty face flushed red. What nonsense are you saying? Leola yelled with a red face. When did I propose to you? Undoubtedly, you just said that your country has taken a fancy to my bloodline and hopes to have an elf envoys mate with me to give birth to even more outstanding descendants, right? Noah was amused by Leola's reaction. Since that's the case, there's no reason for your country to allow some ordinary elven ambassador to mate with me for the sake of having outstanding offspring. Instead, they would allow the most outstanding elven ambassador in the country to become my other half. No matter how I think about it, it can only be you, the princess who has inherited the rare dragon bloodline and is the trump card of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, right? Leola's expression froze. Clearly, the future Noah spoke of was not impossible. If that was the case, then wasn't Leola, who had been persuading Noah to pledge his loyalty to the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, proposing to Noah? What? You have nothing to say, right? Noah said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then, Your Highness Princess of the Dragon Nation, do you still want me to pledge my loyalty to your country and leave my descendants behind? Ugh. Leola didn't know what to say. She could only fidget there with a red face. After a while, Leola glared at Noah. As expected, let's talk about it after you defeat me. After saying that, Leola turned around and left as if she was fleeing from a desperate situation. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but laugh. As expected, no matter how strong you are, you're still an innocent witch. Chapter 1794. 2 days passed by in the blink of an eye. When the sky was once again shrouded in darkness, dazzling fireworks bloomed one after another in the sky above the Holy Realm's floating island. While illuminating the entire starry sky, they painted a variety of flames. The scene was exceptionally gorgeous. However, those fireworks were not ordinary fireworks. They were the scene of the elves sealed in the elven or being released and shot into the sky. For ordinary people, using such a method to create fireworks was undoubtedly beyond common sense. After all, the elven ore was quite expensive. Not to mention other things, if the most ordinary family wanted to buy a piece of elven ore, they would definitely have to spend a lot of money. They might have to scrimp and save for the next few months just to afford a piece of elven ore again. Under such circumstances, it was unimaginably extravagant to shoot such expensive elven ores into the air like fireworks. However, for the Elven Sword Dance Festival that was only held once every few years, and was a sacrifice to the greatest existence in the world, people did not have the intention to cut corners. It was completely necessary to be extravagant. At this very moment, countless people had surged into the spacious hall of the Grand Offering Hall. It was bustling as if it was a festival from somewhere. These people were all waiting for the appearance of the 5 elven concubines. The 5 elven concubines were in the deepest part of the great sacrificial hall, listening to the voices of the 5 elven kings. As the elven concubines who directly served the elven kings, these girls could directly communicate with the elven kings to a certain extent, receive the elven king's orders, and spread them to the world. The finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be held tomorrow. The elven concubines needed to listen to the elven king's voice, and through the elven king's announcement, they would know the location of the finals and spread it to everyone. Therefore, people poured into the great sacrificial hall en masse, waiting for the elven concubines to announce the location of the finals. Of course, to the rest of the people, this was just a large-scale ceremony. Therefore, gathering in the great sacrificial hall like this was just the human nature of wanting to join in the fun. In other words, the House of Gods did not require the contestants of the finals to be present and listen to the elven concubines' announcement. Because of this, the purgatory apostles of the Alphys Empire were not present. They only released their envoys to the great sacrificial hall, intending to learn the location of the finals through the elven concubine. Although that was the case, Lotus also came to the Great Sacrificial Hall. No, Lotus did not directly enter the Great Sacrificial Hall. Otherwise, if the strongest sword dancer appeared in such a lively scene, it would definitely cause a strong fan reaction, right? Lotus did not like the atmosphere of being sought after. The feeling of being the center of attention was a little uncomfortable for this person who came from the Education Academy and was once trained to be an assassin. Therefore, Lotus came to the top of a hill and looked down at the bustling Great Sacrificial Hall as she softly murmured, "Tomorrow is the finals." His voice had just sounded when another clear and pleasant voice, which was like a silver bell, rang out. "And the duel you desire will soon be realized, right?" Along with such a pleasant voice, pitch-black feathers suddenly fluttered down around Lotus. Amidst the feathers that filled the sky, Lestia quietly appeared. She raised her head and looked at Lotus's delicate figure as she stood in the wind. There was a trace of sorrow in her voice. "Have you really decided to fight that person? Didn't you already get the answer?" Lotus laughed bitterly. "What's the point in asking? Because it's not necessary at all." Lestia sighed. "You've perfectly inherited the Dark Elf King's power, and have long become an unprecedented demon king. You don't even need to fear the 5 great elf kings. You can do whatever you want. Why are you so obsessed with that man?" "You're wrong, Lestia." Lotus shook her head. Her voice was extremely cold. "Even if I don't persist, I can't do what I want to do. The power lodging in my body belongs to the Dark Elf King, and the Dark Elf King is the enemy of the 5 great elf kings. Since I've inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and become the Demon King, I can't avoid fighting the 5 great elf kings." Lestia was speechless. But after a while, Lestia immediately refuted. "But before that, you can also do what you want to do. With the power of the Demon King, is there anything in this world that you can't do?" "So, Lestia, you still don't understand." Lotus raised her head and looked at the night sky, her voice faintly discernible. "What I want to do is to end things with Noah. But that man is too dangerous." Lestia's tone inevitably became anxious. "He's clearly not like you, who inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. He's also not as special as the Red Lotus, whose origins are unknown. I've never even heard of his existence before. Yet, he was able to form a contract with the strongest sword elf and even fight against you as a human. That man is truly too mysterious and too strange. Even if it's you against such a person, there's no guarantee that you can win. That's why it's meaningful." Lotus unconsciously placed her hand on her heart. If there's no suspense, then what's the point? Lestia bit her lip when she saw that Lotus did not listen to her advice. A vexed expression appeared on her face. Unlike Lotus, who was obsessed with Noah, Lestia was only wary and hostile towards Noah. That was because Noah was too mysterious. It wasn't just in the aspect that Lestia had just mentioned. In other aspects, Noah was far too mysterious a person. The reason why Lotus could perfectly control the power of the Dark Elf King was because Noah's thing seemed to be lodged in her heart, and it played a role in controlling her. The Dark Elf King was afraid of the thing in Lotus' heart. Or rather, it had no resistance to the thing in Lotus' heart. That was why it was so obedient to Lotus' control. Since that thing belonged to Noah, it was enough to see how powerful he was. Frankly speaking, Lestia had always been very uneasy. If Lotus was defeated by Noah and the thing in her heart was taken away, the Dark Elf King's power would go berserk and turn into a ball of resentment. What would she do then? This uneasiness had always been buried deep in Lestia's heart, and had become a source of pressure. If possible, Lestia really wanted to kill Noah behind Lotus' back. Unfortunately, Lestia knew that she could not do anything to Noah with her own strength. Since she could not do anything to Noah, nor could she persuade Lotus, Lestia was helpless. "I really don't know what to say about you," Lestia complained. "Who did you learn from when you refused to listen to advice?" Lotus could not help but smile when she heard this. "Then it can only be from you, right, Lestia?" No matter what, Lestia had always been by Lotus' side when she was in the Education Institute. She taught Lotus all the emotions and beauty in the world, and let Lotus know the truth of the world. If it wasn't for Celestia, Lotus would have become an emotionless tool that only existed for the sake of slaughter under the tutelage of the Education Institute. "I don't remember teaching you to be so awkward," Lestia said unhappily. Then she quietly stepped forward and held Lotus's hand as she spoke softly. You have to win, Lotus. I will. Lotus squeezed Lestia's hand and smiled. After all, I still have to help you fulfill your wish. Yes. Lestia raised her head and looked at the starry sky with Lotus. Fulfill the wish that couldn't be fulfilled 3 years ago. Yes. Lotus nodded heavily. This time we will succeed in one fell swoop. Let's hope so, Lestia said with a smile. But Red Lotus' wish is different from ours. She might become our obstacle. You can't forget this. I know. Lotus's eyes twinkled. What she and I are praying for is the same, but the methods we use are different. Whether my method is correct or hers will depend on this year's Fairy Sword Dance Festival. Chapter 1795. In the center of the floating island in the corridor, Noah walked forward with strong steps and arrived in front of a room. Without any hesitation, Noah opened the door and barged in. Sorry I'm late. Noah's voice immediately made the room that was in a state of discussion return to silence. Claire, Lindley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls all gathered their gazes on Noah with some dissatisfaction on their faces. Really, where did you go? Lindley puffed up her cheeks. You didn't even attend the announcement of the elf concubine. Don't you care at all where the finals are? Anyway, you'll definitely go, right? Noah said as he sat down on the last seat of the round table. Since you're going, it doesn't matter if I go or not, right? Don't you know what a team operation is? Claire sighed dumbfoundedly. Come on, you're still the captain. Well, I have my own things to do. Noah shrugged. In order to better understand the opponent, I've been spending almost all my time in the sanctuary's library these 2 days. Since the last time he had some guesses about the identity of Red Lotus, Noah began to confirm his own guesses and did a lot of research for this. Therefore, in the past 2 days, the group of girls had been conserving their energy. Only Noah had been immersed in the library of the Holy Region and had been collecting information. The girls also knew about this matter. Therefore, when they heard Noah say this, the girls immediately calmed down. Then how's your investigation? Alice asked as if she was concerned. Is there a result? More or less. Noah scratched his cheek and glanced at Claire and Fayanna. Seeing that the 2 girls were listening to him attentively, he smiled bitterly in his heart and changed the topic. So, has the location of the finals been announced? Yes. Fayanna nodded. The location of the finals is the abandoned city of Megidor. Megidor. Noah frowned. After spending 2 days in the Sanctum's library, Noah had gained some understanding of the floating island. This so-called Megidor was originally called the Ivory City. It was not a famous place among the floating islands in the Sanctum. From its nickname, Abandoned City, it could be seen that it was a place that no one would ever mention. Noah had inadvertently found a record of it in a book. It was said that it was a city built by the elves of the elemental spirit world during the primordial era. However, that city was reduced to ruins in a war. That war was the Elven War. The 5 Elven Kings Camp and the Dark Elven Kings Camp had launched an unprecedented war, and the final battlefield was the abandoned city of Megidor. Because of that war, Megidor had been reduced to ruins, becoming a battlefield that had been abandoned for a long time. Why would the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival be held in such a place? Noah frowned. No matter what, the Elven Sword Dance Festival is a sacrificial ceremony. There's no reason to hold it in such a junkyard, right? We were just discussing this point. Fayanna said with a troubled expression. But, in the end we still couldn't come to a conclusion. That's true. Noah's frown slowly relaxed as he said this. Since you can't understand, then don't think about it. Anyway, what we have to do is the same. We have to win. That's right. Claire nodded her head heavily, her expression becoming more and more serious. But, the finals are a little different from the preliminaries. We have to discuss how we should act. The rest of the girls nodded as well. The finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival was the same as the preliminaries. It was a battle for magic stones. The 4 teams that qualified for the finals would be randomly teleported to the battleground. They could move freely and try their best to obtain magic stones. In the end, the team that obtained the most magic stones would be the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The difference was that the finals would only last for 3 days. Moreover, the random teleportation this time wasn't based on the teams, but on the members of the team. In other words, even if they were elven users of the same team, they would still be separated and randomly teleported to different places. After that, it would be up to each team to decide what to do. If we can find our teammates first and act together, it would definitely be more advantageous. Alice pointed out the main point. If we act alone, once we encounter an enemy, it is very likely that we will immediately enter a battle. That would be too dangerous. Yeah. Lindsley agreed, which was rare. I don't think that I can win against those ace-level opponents in a one-on-one battle. Although Claire, Lindsley, Frianna, and Alice were all outstanding elven users, compared to those ace-level team leaders, they most likely had no chance of winning in a one-on-one battle. Not to mention Lotus, just the Dragon Duke Leola of the Dragon Duchy of Laguna and the Holy Knight Luminaris of the Holy Lucia Kingdom, let alone one-on-one, even if 2 or 3 of them worked together, they might not be able to win. They had to gather at least 2 people to have a chance of not losing against Leola and Luminaris. If they had the chance, they could definitely escape unscathed. As for Lotus, even if the 4 of them gathered together, they would only be serving themselves as fodder. Not to mention Lotus, Leola, and Luminaris were only ace-level team leaders on the surface. In the Purgatory Apostles, other than Lotus, there were also extremely dangerous characters among the elven users. For example, Red Lotus. For example, Muya. That little girl who could single-handedly control tactical military elves. If she had enough military elves to squander, her strength would definitely be on par with Leola and Luminaris. Therefore, this was a test of luck. Whether or not they could meet up with their teammates before encountering those ace-level opponents would be a very important factor in the outcome. If that's the case, then the communication elven or in elven magic will probably be greatly restricted. Detection skills may also not be of use. Otherwise, the organizers wouldn't have used this competition format. Noah curled his lips. It's completely up to luck here. Among us, the only one who doesn't have to worry about encountering enemies before meeting up with his teammates is you. Claire looked at Noah. If it's you, even if you encounter Lotus Asubble, you can still escape unscathed, right? After all, Noah is our team's ace-level team leader, Fianna said helplessly. Just like how we have to worry about encountering other teams' ace-level players before meeting up, the other teams will definitely worry about encountering our ace-level players, right? In other words, everyone's conditions are the same, Alice said. The rest will depend on luck. Luck, Lindsley said confidently. I've always had a lot of confidence in my luck. Although she said this, Lindsley's fingers were unconsciously curling her hair. Clearly, Lindsley was also very nervous. There are only 3 days and the team members are all separated. That's different from the preliminaries. It's impossible to siege a stronghold or something like that. Noah looked pensive. After a while, Noah suddenly smiled. Good. Noah clapped his hands. The course of action has been decided. All the girls' expressions brightened. However, when Noah told all the girls about the team's course of action, they were all stunned. Really? Claire couldn't help but ask. Isn't that too dangerous? It's too ostentatious. Even Fianna was nervous. Is there really no problem? Who knows? Noah said very irresponsibly. If we don't try, who knows if it will work or not? The girls looked at each other. In the end, they could only nod. Although it was very reckless, they had to admit. If Noah's plan succeeded, the situation would become very advantageous to them. Chapter 1796. Just like that, the day of the finals arrived. In the room, Noah put on the Alicia Elven Academy uniform. After he was done, he reached out and picked up the 2 small swords on the bedside. Looking at the 2 small swords in his hands, especially the silver one, Noah muttered in his heart. Still can't pull himself together. Although Aster would still respond to Noah when he needed to use the elven device, during this time, Aster did not appear in his human form. Even when Noah used the contract to communicate with Aster, although Aster responded, his voice was very weak. It was obvious that Aster's condition was not good. There was only one reason for this state to appear. That was the existence of Red Lotus. As expected, Aster is still very concerned about the aura of the Saintess that appeared on Red Lotus. The aura of his dead master appeared once again. It was not because of such a simple reason that Aster's condition was so bad. If it was only because he felt the aura of his dead master, then Aster would not have such a strong reaction. After all, no matter what, Aster was already Noah's contract spirit, and not the Saintess of Salvation's contract spirit. Even if it was a former master, once the contract ended, even if the past ties still existed, the elves would still pay more attention to their current elven envoy. The problem was that to Aster, the Saintess of Salvation was not just a contractor. To Aster, the Saintess of Salvation was a victim of her own curse. Presumably, Aster had always felt a strong sense of guilt towards the Saintess of Salvation. Otherwise, Aster would not have sealed himself in the sword. Before Noah appeared, he swore that he would never communicate with another elven envoy. Now the appearance of the Saintess of Salvation's aura triggered the guilt in Aster's heart, causing it to explode. This was the main reason why Aster was not in his best condition. Aster! Noah felt a little heartache. At this time, Athena's voice sounded in Noah's mind. That holy sword spirit isn't as weak as you think. She just needs some time, Athena said calmly. So at this time, it's better for you to leave the holy sword spirit alone. I know. Noah took a deep breath. It's just that I might have to fight against Red Lotus in the finals. When the time comes, you can just use me, Athena said decisively. Didn't you hide me so that I could help you win at the critical moment? No matter what, Athena would never lose to Aster. Even an existence like the Elf King would be able to compete with her. With such a hidden trump card once taken out, it would definitely be able to turn the tide of the battle, right? In addition, there was no need for Athena to appear. Noah believed that hiding the Holy Sword Spirit, which was comparable to the Elven King, as a trump card would definitely be effective. For this reason, Noah had never used Athena. However, if he had to fight against Red Lotus, it would not be strange at all if he had to use Athena. In terms of strength, that elf envoy was probably not inferior to Noah and Lotus. Hence, Athena's decisiveness was absolutely necessary. At this time, Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. You don't have to take special care of me, divine sword spirit. I'm not so depraved as to immerse myself in my own memories when Master is in a tough battle. Aster? Noah's expression lit up as he hurriedly asked. Are you okay? I'm fine, Master. Aster's voice was as emotionless as usual. However, Noah, who knew Aster well, could hear the fatigue and determination in his voice. Please don't worry about me. I am Master's sword. Even if Alicia really revives and becomes Master's enemy, as Master's sword, I will still point at her. You don't have to force yourself, Noah said hesitantly. Although Red Lotus is troublesome, even if I only use Athena, it won't be easy for her to take me down. I'm not forcing myself. Aster's voice carried a trace of determination. If that elf envoy called Red Lotus really has some kind of relationship with Alicia, then I have to face her personally. At this point, Aster paused for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Master said that he doesn't want to leave behind any regrets. Hence, before you carry out your mission, you have many things to do. Hence, in order to not leave behind any regrets, I have to face Alicia's matter. Noah was speechless. Just let her be. It was rare for Athena to stand on the same side as Aster. Facing the unbearable past is painful, but it is not a reason to escape. Perhaps that is the only way for the divine sword spirit to break free from the past and regain a new life. Meeting Noah allowed Aster to face his curse and open his heart to others. However, other than the curse, Aster still had to face the pain of his past. Only by overcoming the pain could Aster be considered to have regained a new life. In order to not leave behind any regrets, he wholeheartedly followed Noah and faced life and death with Noah. Perhaps Red Lotus was the last obstacle Aster had to face. Tightly grasping the silver dagger, Noah nodded heavily. After coming out of the room, Noah met up with Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls. Apart from the girls, Milea, Carol, and even Mira were present. I will cheer for you. Milea hugged Linsley tightly. Big sister, you have to save big sister Yusha. I know. Linsley gently stroked her sister's head. Leave it to me. Mississippi, Carol hugged Linsley as well. I will cheer for you too. You have to do your best too, Carol, Linsley said worriedly. When I'm not here, you have to eat on time. Don't starve until I come back just because you don't know how to cook. Woo! Carol nodded repeatedly. I will, Mississippi. The originally touching scene became a bit strange for some reason. At the very least, Claire, Viviana, and Alice looked as if they wanted to say something but couldn't. Just as Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry, the corner of his clothes was pulled. Noah, you have to do your best too. Mira looked straight at Noah, her heterochromatic eyes shaking slightly. I believe you will definitely win. Don't worry. Noah reached out and patted Myra's head. It won't be that easy to beat me. After everyone said their goodbyes, a witch from the God Parliament knocked on the door. She stood outside and bowed to everyone. Everyone, it's time. Please bring your items within the stipulated weight and follow me to the door. That will teleport you to the final venue. Everyone glanced at each other and nodded. Because the location this time was special and it was a random individual teleportation, the magic array that would teleport the contestants to the final venue wasn't in the Great Sacrificial Hall, but in the 4 holy halls scattered around the city tower. Under the guidance of Witch G, Noah and the others came to a holy hall that looked like an ancestral hall. Inside the holy hall, a total of 5 magic arrays were emitting a faint light. Please enter the teleportation door. It will teleport you to the location of the finals. Witch G, who was leading the way, bowed to everyone. I wish you all the best. Claire, Lindsley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls looked at each other. Then their gazes all converged on Noah. Under the gazes of the girls, Noah smiled and nodded. Immediately after, the group of people lifted their feet at the same time and stepped into the glowing magic array. Clank! The bright light enveloped everyone. In the next second, the group turned into light particles and merged into the magic array, disappearing on the spot. The final of the Elven Sword Dance Festival began. Chapter 1797. Before Noah opened his eyes again, his sharp senses allowed Noah to sense that something was wrong. At this moment, within the range of Noah's senses, everything seemed to have lost its vitality and was filled with an aura of death. Noah opened his eyes. The scene in front of him was an extremely vast and huge city. It was not an ordinary city, but was filled with the traces of time, as if it had been abandoned for a long time. The sky was dark gray without any light. Around him were buildings made of huge stones, which looked like sacrificial halls. The rubble was piled up like a mountain. The ground seemed to have weathered and was full of cracks. This abandoned city was located in a sea of trees filled with strangely shaped trees, as if it had existed since the birth of the world, and was filled with an ancient aura. However, in that aura there was not a trace of vitality. In the world of the elemental spirits, elves should be everywhere and exist in all kinds of environments. However, in this abandoned city, Noah did not sense any elf's aura. No wonder this place is called an abandoned city. Even elves have given up living in this place? This was a very inconceivable thing. It should be known that even if it was an abandoned place, logically speaking, there should still be elves. For example, in swamps, elves with poison attributes like to live there. For example, in deserted deserts, elves with fire attributes and a preference for hot and dry environments would also live there. In the world of the elemental spirits, there were so many types of elves that they could be found everywhere. It was absolutely inconceivable that there wasn't a single sprite in existence. However, we can't rule out the possibility that elves that only appear at night live here. Thinking about this, Noah patted his cheeks. Now is not the time for archaeology. Let's start implementing the action plan that we set yesterday. After that, Noah raised his hand high up in the air towards the gloomy sky. A surge of magical power suddenly rose from Noah's body, turning into a gust of wind that swept the surroundings and raised the sand in the sky. Like a whirlpool with Noah as the center, it kept spinning. Clang! An extremely complicated and mysterious geometric magic array suddenly rose from Noah's hand and flashed in front of the palm facing the sky, emitting a faint light. The surge of magical power from Noah's body suddenly turned into a stream of air and poured into the magic array. Suddenly, under the infusion of a huge amount of magical power, the complicated and mysterious geometric magic array expanded little by little, and finally expanded to a diameter of tens of meters. This should be enough, right? Noah muttered and then suddenly chanted. Cast! The huge magic array that was spinning suddenly came to a halt. In the next moment, a huge beam of light shot up into the sky and shot towards the sky. Amidst the violent tremors in the atmosphere, the dark gray clouds in the sky were dispersed and lit up the entire gloomy abandoned city. During the elven sword dance ritual, Noah did not use the magic cannon except for the unfriendly greeting with the elven envoys of the Purgatory Apostles at the beginning. After all, in the world of the elemental elves, the elven envoys could turn the elven magical equipment and elven magic into pure divine aura to cause mental damage to the opponent and not directly hurt the opponent's body. However, Noah's magic cannon was not in this category. It was not the elven magic cannon, and once it was used, it would only cause physical damage. Therefore, Noah did not use the magic cannon during the elven sword dance ritual. In the finals, the magic cannon would probably not be used, right? However, at this moment, Noah needed to use the magic cannon to do something. That was to point out the direction for his companions. At this moment, the huge magic light beam that shot up into the sky attracted the attention of all the elven envoys that were teleported to the ancient capital. Is it there? In front of a dilapidated building, Alice looked at the huge magic light beam that shot up into the sky. She held the elven magical equipment in her hand and rushed in a certain direction. That guy actually managed to accomplish such an exaggerated feat in an abandoned alley. Claire also rushed in a certain direction with the flame whip in her hand. Among everyone, I am the weakest. I have to hurry and meet up with my companions. In the path surrounded by the shade of trees, Fianna looked nervous and serious as she jogged forward. If one observed carefully, they would discover that the three girls were all rushing in the same direction. That was the course of action set by Noah. After being teleported to the abandoned city, Noah would directly release the most eye-catching spell in the sky to ensure that everyone could see it. At that time, everyone would rush 200 meters north in that direction. There, apart from Noah, the girls could meet up and move as a group. As for why they didn't directly converge at the light beam and instead went 200 meters north, the reason was very simple. Using such an obvious method to point out the direction, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice definitely wouldn't be the only ones that got the hint. After seeing the huge light beam that shot up into the sky, all the elven envoys hesitated for a moment. Some went straight for the light beam, while others were worried and took a detour. Under such circumstances, if the girls went straight for the light beam, they would only encounter the other elven envoys and enter a battle. Therefore, they couldn't directly go to the light beam. This was the course of action set by Noah. Because of this, the group of girls thought that this method was reckless and dangerous. However, Noah possessed strength that exceeded that of ordinary people. Even if there were elven envoys that followed the huge light beam to his door, they would only be delivering magic stones to Noah. There was only one thing that Noah miscalculated. That was, not everyone was able to see the gigantic magic light pillar that connected the heavens and the earth. In an underground maze, Linley blankly looked at the stone walls and the intricate paths in all directions. After a while, she let out a sorrowful cry. Where is this? Wang? As the sound of air vibrations became weaker and weaker, the huge magic light beam that shot up into the sky started to dim little by little. Finally, it turned into a ray of light and disappeared in the air. At the same time, that huge magic array with geometrical patterns also slowly shrunk until it disappeared. Phew! Noah let out a sigh of relief and murmured, "There shouldn't be any problems for the time being, right?" At this time, the elven envoys in the team should have rushed to the designated location to converge. And the elven envoys in the other teams would definitely be rushing over here. In the plan, Noah was the only one who didn't need to rush to the rendezvous. This was because Noah could stay here and wait for others to deliver magic stones to him. However, there should be a lot of people who are worried that this is a trap. It's impossible for too many people to come here directly, Noah muttered to himself. Except for a limited number of people. As soon as this sentence came out of Noah's mouth, the sound of wings flapping in the air sounded in midair. Noah raised his head and looked at the sky. There, a giant dragon with a pitch-black luster flew over and stopped in front of Noah. "It seems that my luck is very good." Accompanied by such a voice, the Dragon Duchess of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia stared at Noah with a burning battle intent in her eyes. "This is also the Dragon King's blessing, right? Is that so?" Noah smiled indifferently. Are you sure your luck isn't the worst? If the bad luck you're talking about is encountering you. A rather heroic smile appeared on Leola's delicate and cute face. Sorry, I think my luck is really good. As soon as he said that, the huge black dragon flying in midair immediately opened its ferocious dragon mouth, and surging black flames suddenly surged within. In the next instant, the pitch-black flames turned into a flame breath that fell from the sky. Like a burning meteorite, it shot toward Noah. Chapter 1798. Gloomy and cold air pervaded the ancient abandoned capital, covering every corner of the ruins of this former battlefield. In front of a dilapidated wall, Claire scuttled out from the shadows. While vigilant of her surroundings, she began to look around. Everyone's not here yet? She immediately received a response as soon as she finished speaking. No, I'm already here. With such a voice, a gust of wind blew in the air. Alice rode the wind and landed in front of Claire. Alice, why are you only here now? Claire asked in surprise. I thought you would be the first to arrive. Alice was a wind elf and had an advantage in speed. Naturally, she would be the first to arrive. The place I was transported to was quite far from here, Alice explained. Moreover, in order to not attract enemies from other teams, I deliberately lowered my altitude before daring to fly over. I didn't think about that. Claire suddenly understood, but then became worried again. Then Linley and Fayanna couldn't have been transported to a very far place, right? It's possible. Alice nodded. However, you don't have to worry about Linley. As long as she doesn't encounter an ace general or an elf messenger, escaping shouldn't be a problem. The problem is Fayanna. Claire continued Alice's words. Fayanna hasn't received proper elf messenger training. Her combat ability isn't strong, and she hasn't undergone wilderness survival training. It's a problem whether she has enough stamina to get here. Yes. Alice sighed. I really hope your highness can get here safely. Almost at the same time as Alice sighed, a somewhat angry voice sounded. Although I know I'm the one who needs to be worried the most, it's still very infuriating to talk about me behind my back like this. Saying this, Fayanna squeezed out of a dark alley, panting slightly. Fayanna! Claire called out in surprise. Your highness! Alice also let out a sigh of relief. I'm so tired. Fayanna approached with a tired expression. Fortunately, I'm close to the gathering point. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the confidence to rush over. Now we have 3 people. Alice's expression relaxed a little. With this lineup, even if we encounter ace commanders like Leola and Luminaris, we can still fight them. Only Linley is left. Claire puffed out her cheeks. Seriously, what is Linley doing? Why is she slower than Fayanna? I heard everything. Fayanna glared at Claire. Perhaps Linsley was teleported to a place far away, and it will take her a lot of time to get here. Let's hope she can hurry over, Alice said hopefully. If we can gather 4 people, we'll have a huge advantage over the other teams. Yes. Claire sighed. The finals have only started less than an hour ago. Right now, the other team should still be looking for their companions, or even wandering around. If we can gather 4 people in advance, then other than Liena Subble, no matter who we encounter, we will be able to fight. Unfortunately, Claire didn't know that apart from Lotus, there was also the unfathomable Red Lotus in this Elven Sword Dance Festival. Against Red Lotus, even if Claire's party of 4 gathered, they would still be defeated, right? Let's wait here for Linley. Alice turned her head and looked in a direction. I wonder how Noah is doing. Claire and Fayanna also turned their heads and looked in that direction. In Noah's plan of action, he was the only one who could act freely. In other words, Noah's group would split into 2 and fight for magic stones on their own. If they gathered together, perhaps the safety of Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice's group would be guaranteed, but for the purpose of collecting magic stones, the speed would be much slower. When the other teams were scattered and they gathered together, Noah thought that he would form a team that could deal with any situation. Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice would form a team of 4 and fight for magic stones on their own. That way they would be faster. However, Noah also left a command. Once you encounter Lotus and Red Lotus, retreat immediately. Don't fight. Dong! The scorching flash shot down from the sky and hit the ground, shattering the fragile ground. It set off an astonishing wind and flames that spread in all directions in an instant. In the gale, Noah was like a weightless leaf, drifting away along with the gale and retreating quickly. In front of him, in the violent gale and flames, a figure rushed out like a bullet with a sharp sound breaking through the air. The pitch-black sword in her hand was like a deadly sickle, cutting through the air and sweeping toward Noah. Noah's figure suddenly stopped. He took a step and moved to the side, dodging abruptly. Bang! The pitch-black greatsword that brushed past Noah's body immediately landed on the ground. It was like a heavy warhammer, directly shattering the ground, causing gravel to splatter in all directions. The air was shaken because of it. That scene was like a small-scale earthquake. It was shocking. Noah, who had dodged that shocking blow, looked at Leola, who had raised her sword again, and said helplessly, "What kind of strange strength is this?" To put it bluntly, Leola's physical strength had completely surpassed Noah's, and was even comparable to Noah's when his ability value reached LV3. With Noah's current physical strength, it was possible for him to vomit blood and be seriously injured after being hit by such power, right? In response, Leola just said matter-of-factly, "Elven magic of the dragon attribute is the strongest among all elven magic, in terms of strengthening one's body. Furthermore, I possess the dragon blood physique, so it's not strange for me to receive additional bonuses when using elven magic of the dragon attribute." After saying that, Leola looked straight at Noah and pointed at Noah with the elven device in her hand. "You should also activate the elven device, right? Or do you think I'm not qualified for you to use the elven device?" To be honest, with Leola's strength, Noah could indeed defeat her without even using the elven device. Compared to Lotus, who had the power of the Elven King, Leola was still a human even though she was the trump card of a country. Even if Noah only relied on strengthening magic spells or a few magic cannons, he could still defeat Leola easily. However, if he didn't use the elven device, Noah's attack would directly hurt Leola's body, and could cause her to be seriously injured or even killed. Therefore, the endless mana flowing in Noah's body suddenly transformed into divine might energy. Clang! In a dazzling flash, the silver holy sword appeared in Noah's hand like a dazzling aurora. At the same time, a huge amount of divine might energy also rose from Noah's body, and turned into a substantial pressure that attacked the surroundings. Leola only felt a terrifying pressure suddenly pressing down on her body, making her body seem to have become much heavier. Her slender shoulders sank fiercely. This pressure. Leola's breathing stopped slightly, but her gaze towards Noah became more and more scorching. "You're really strong." Noah spoke softly as if he didn't feel Leola's scorching gaze. "Just like you, I'll also introduce my elven device to you. However, I don't think you've never heard of the Demon Slayer before, right?" What? Leola's expression changed. "That's the holy sword used by the Saintess of Salvation?" "That's right." Noah raised the holy sword in his hand and pointed it at Leola. "The sword in my hand is the holy sword that killed the Demon King." Leola stared at the elven device in Noah's hand and smiled after hearing that. Very good, very good. Now it's worth fighting with all my strength." However, at this moment, something strange happened. Chapter 1799. All of a sudden surge of dense malice permeated the space and broke into Noah's sensing range. Noah abruptly came to a halt. Leola seemed to have sensed that something was amiss and decisively stopped. Both of them turned their heads and looked at their surroundings. The scene that entered their eyes caused Noah and Leola to stand up in shock. Amidst the ear-piercing vibrations, countless black shadows suddenly sprang out from the ground like a twisted swamp. They stood up in a wobbly manner like puppets. It was a group of humanoid figures, but their silhouettes were rather blurry. They were like shadows and zombies that swayed as though they could fall at any time. Malice that was visible to the naked eye transformed into pitch-black resentment that lingered around the silhouettes of the black shadows. In the blink of an eye, countless black shadows emerged from the ground and surrounded Noah and Leola. "What's that?" Leola stood up in surprise. "Are those elves?" Noah looked around and was somewhat surprised. At this moment, a voice sounded in Noah's mind. "Master," Aster suddenly spoke, "those are crippled elves." Crippled elves? Noah was stunned. This was because he had never heard of any crippled elves in this world. Aster was naturally aware of this matter and explained it out loud. Crippled elves are a type of undead. If elves have too much resentment when they are annihilated, They will lose their spirituality and turn into undead that wander the land. This abandoned city used to be the final battle site of the Elven War. Many elves died, and those elves have turned into undead without reason and remain here. After saying that, Aster said this in an indifferent voice. In the past Elven Wars, although I didn't belong to any of the 5 Elven Kings or the Dark Elven Kings camp, the Elven Kings were quite wary of me. Because of this, many elves who belonged to either of the 2 camps came looking for me and were destroyed by me. I'm afraid that it's because Master used me that these crippled elves with strong resentment appeared. The facts proved that Aster's guess was completely correct. There was no other reason. The black shadows that emerged from the ground immediately turned their shapeless faces toward Noah, who was holding the demon slayer, and let out a roar full of resentment. The roar that sounded like a malicious spirit from the abyss made Noah and Leola extremely uncomfortable and frowned at the same time. In the next second, hundreds and thousands of black shadows that were like a black wave suddenly rushed toward Noah and Leola from all directions. Humph! Leola snorted coldly and looked at the sea of black shadows that rushed toward her with deep disgust in her eyes. A bunch of filthy things. Disappear. Then Leola raised the pitch-black sword in her hand and fiercely swung it at the group of black shadows that rushed toward her. From the movements of the black shadows, it could be seen that they might have been very famous and powerful elves when they were alive. But in the situation where only resentment was left after death, these black shadows were not worth mentioning at all in terms of individual strength. At least, in the face of an elven envoy like Leola, even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of these black shadows, they would only be courting death. However, Noah, who vaguely felt that something was wrong, almost reflexively called out, "Wait!" Leola was slightly taken aback. But at this moment, the elven device that Leola swung out had already arrived in front of the black shadows that rushed toward them. Slash! As the cold sword light flashed, a crisp tearing sound resounded. Nidhogg, who was known as the strongest dragon elf in the Dragon Emperor Knight Legion, neatly cut apart the dark shadows that pounced at him one after another. The black shadows that had been cut in half roared with resentment and disappeared into the void. With a casual strike, Leola annihilated dozens of crippled elves. But at the same time, the luster on the pitch-black sword in Leola's hand suddenly dimmed as if it was blinded. This scene made Leola's expression change abruptly. Divine might has been weakened? Noah's expression also darkened. I knew it wasn't that simple. Those so-called crippled elves had the ability to weaken divine might. No, it couldn't be called an ability. It should be said that as long as one came into contact with those black shadows, one's body would more or less be stained with filth, which Ji had to maintain a pure body and mind at all times in order to unleash her power. If the elven magic device was stained with filth, then its divine might would naturally be weakened. Noah had reason to believe that. If they were swallowed by the black shadows, then other than him who had endless divine might and wasn't afraid of being weakened, Leola and Aster's divine might would be plundered clean. Therefore, even Noah had to be careful not to let the demon slayer touch those black shadows that were filled with resentment. But apart from that, there's nothing else to pay attention to. Looking at the large number of black shadows that rushed toward him like a tide, Noah calmly raised his hand and pointed forward. Besides, I don't have to be merciful when dealing with existences like you. A complicated magic array with geometric patterns appeared in front of Noah's palm. Inside, a huge amount of magic power gathered. Boom! Like a flash of light, the beam of magic power exploded in the tide of pitch-black shadows that blotted out the sky and earth, turning into an astonishing impact and fire wave that suddenly shook and expanded, covering the shadows that were roaring and pouncing in one direction. Instantly, those black shadows were annihilated by the explosion of light and wave of fire, not leaving a single trace behind. It was as if they never existed in the first place, disappearing without a trace. On the other side, Leola seemed to be wary of those black shadows and didn't dare to touch them anymore. She suddenly threw the pitch-black greatsword in her hand into the air. The pitch-black greatsword emitted a dazzling radiance, and gradually turned into a pitch-black dragon within the radiance. It roared towards the sky and spat out a scorching flame breath towards the large number of black figures below that were like waves. Boom! There was another shocking explosion. The flames spread out like a storm, incinerating the black shadows one by one. In the two shocking explosions, the ground unknowingly cracked open. Just as Noah and Leola were preparing to annihilate all the crippled elves around them in one fell swoop, the ground couldn't withstand the continuous bombardment and suddenly burst open. Caught off guard, Noah and Leola fell into a bottomless pit under the collapse of the ground. The shattered ground lifted up countless rocks and debris. Immediately, like a great earthquake, the bottomless pit was buried. After an unknown amount of time, the tremors on the ground began to stop. The bottomless pit was also completely buried by the gravel and debris, without a single gap. A sea of black figures surrounded the crater that was filled with gravel and debris. They were like puppets that had lost control, swaying on the spot. From time to time, they would let out roars of resentment, causing the atmosphere to be extremely horrifying. After a while, many elves who had arrived at the scene saw this scene. After a while, their expressions changed. For a while, they silently chose to retreat. The first scene of the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival ended like this. Bang! Bang bang bang! Amidst the heavy sounds, huge gravel fragments smashed into the dark underground, causing the echoes to ripple in the space and didn't calm down for a long time. In the bottomless pit, Noah and Leola were both suspended in midair, looking at the ground that was completely buried by gravel and debris with deeply furrowed brows. Of course, Noah was relying on his own strength to fly. On the other hand, Leola was riding on the back of her contracted elf and was carried by Nidhogg to fly there. In the next second, the two of them looked at each other and immediately chose to stop at the same time. At the same time, they fell into the bottomless pit. Chapter 1800. Wang. As soon as Leola landed on the ground, Nidhogg shuddered and turned into light particles, disappearing on the spot. Leola, who was riding on Nidhogg's back, fell from midair. Although she stabilized herself and didn't fall, her body softened and half knelt on the ground. Noah, who also fell from midair, looked at the feeble Leola in a daze. "What happened to you?" "I'm fine," Leola panted and spoke weakly. "It's just that my divine power was slightly depleted." "Too much divine power was lost?" Noah understood. "Was it taken away by those useless elves?" "Although it was only for a short moment, I was indeed touched by many useless elves." Leola nodded. "Now there should be less than 1% of the divine power left in my body, right?" "Less than 1% of the divine power left?" Leola was only touched for a short moment and those useless elves took away so much of her divine power? It seemed that those useless elves were considered a threat to ordinary elven users. "I can't believe you dared to admit your current condition so openly." Noah glanced at Leola. "Aren't you afraid that I will attack you now and take away your magic stones? Anyway, I'm almost powerless now. Even if I hide it from you, it won't take long for you to see through it, right?" Leola said without looking up. "If that's the case, it doesn't matter if I hide it or not." Leola turned her gaze to Noah and stared straight into Noah's eyes. "Besides, I don't think you will attack me in your current condition." "Oh." Noah raised a brow. "Why do you think so?" "Simple," Leola said calmly. "Because you didn't think I was a strong opponent that you needed to deal with all your strength from the start, right? Should I say, as expected of the trump card of the Dragon Duchy of Dalagunia? Even if she was loyal to her fighting instincts, it didn't mean she was a fool." This Duke Long had already seen through Noah's thoughts. "In your heart, your true opponent should only be the strongest sword dancer. Renesubble," Leola said softly. "Am I right?" However, this time Noah denied it. "You're wrong," Noah said indifferently. "Other than Renesubble, there's another person in the Purgatory Apostles that I have to take seriously." His words made Leola frown slightly. Then she said hesitantly, "That's right. Are you referring to that elven user called Red Lotus?" "What?" Noah was surprised. "Renesubble, you're also paying attention to her?" "I just have a vague feeling that the elven envoy isn't that simple." Leola didn't hide her thoughts. "Since even you have noticed her, it proves that my intuition is right." After saying that, Leola got up with some difficulty and looked around. "Leola, how do I get out of here?" Noah also raised his eyes and looked around. At this time, Noah and Leola were in an underground sacrificial hall. Around them, broken stone pillars were lying on the ground. Some were shattered, some were broken into pieces. It was obvious that they had been here for a long time. The ceiling was connected to the ground. However, a large amount of rubble had sealed the entrance of the cave. From time to time, some dust would sprinkle down. It seemed that a second collapse could occur at any time. There was no need to examine it at all. Noah and Leola could tell how fragile this place had become over the years. If Noah and Leola did anything violent, the entire sacrificial hall would collapse and bury them alive. Seems like we can't break through to the ground. Otherwise, this place will collapse and bury us alive, Noah concluded. By then, even if we don't die, it will only make the situation worse. We won't be able to return to the ground, right? If Noah was alone, he might be able to break through to the ground using some forceful means. However, with Leola around, even if Noah could protect himself, Leola would be in trouble if this place collapsed. Moreover, if another collapse occurred, it would be unknown whether they could break out of this place. For safety's sake, it would be impossible to break through to the ground using forceful means. This should be a place used to offer sacrifices to the elves in the past. Leola extended her hand and touched an old stone pillar. Considering that this place was built by the elves during the Elven War, it might be a place used to hold some rituals. Therefore, there should be an entrance to the surface. In other words, we can only look for the entrance to the surface since we can't break through to the surface forcefully? Noah looked around. But we didn't see any passageways from here, right? This underground sacrificial hall was a cube-like space with walls in all directions. There weren't any passageways or doors. In other words, this was a completely sealed space. If they didn't destroy it to a certain extent, they wouldn't be able to get out at all. If they destroyed it, it would definitely cause a collapse and bury Noah and Leola alive. This situation was a little troublesome. Perhaps the elves in ancient times used teleportation arrays to enter this underground sacrificial hall, Leola said calmly. So, let's see if there are any teleportation doors here before coming to a conclusion. Let's do that then. Noah shrugged nonchalantly. At this moment, the holy sword in Noah's hand emitted a dazzling radiance that turned into light particles and condensed into a human figure. Aster? Noah was taken aback. Is this the prototype of the holy sword that killed the Demon King? Leola stared intently at Aster, her eyes brimming with vigor. It's actually the highest-ranking elf in human form. But it makes sense. An elf that can kill a Demon King naturally wouldn't be of a low level. It was a pity that Aster didn't care about Leola at all. Instead, he looked at Noah and said, Master, I know how to get out of this place. You know how to get out? Noah was surprised and immediately understood. By the way, you were active in this place during the Elf War. Have you been here before? That should be right. Aster nodded. It's been a long time since I came here. My memory is a little blurry, but I vaguely remember coming here and leaving from here. With that, Aster turned around and walked towards one of the walls of the sacrificial hall. Under Noah and Leola's gaze, Aster raised his hand and gently pressed against the wall. The wall suddenly vanished into thin air, as though it had turned into an illusion. Behind the vanishing wall, a passageway appeared before everyone. If my memory serves me right, there should be a maze ahead. Aster turned around and said to Noah, I still remember how to get out of here. Please follow me, Master. Okay. Noah nodded. Leola also lifted her feet, but she immediately felt powerless and her steps were a little wobbly. Seeing this, Noah asked, Are you all right? Of course, Leola answered without hesitation. The Knights of Dragon Duchy of Doragonia aren't useless trash who can't even walk. Although Leola said that, she was obviously trying to be brave. At that moment, Noah sighed helplessly. He walked over and carried Leola in his arms. Ah! Leola exclaimed. When she realized that Noah had picked her up, her face immediately flushed red. She cried out in a panic, Don't worry, I'm sorry, Noah. What are you doing? Carrying you out of here, of course. Noah rolled his eyes. Or else you might waste a lot of my time. I don't need that. Leola blushed and raised her hands to punch Noah's chest. Put me down. Noah didn't care about Leola at all. Under Leola's panicked and shy state, he ignored Leola's tantrum and followed Aster into the tunnel. Chapter 1801. Tap. 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 In the dim passageway, the clear sound of footsteps echoed around. It was like a piece of music, rising and falling rhythmically. As the guide, Aster held a piece of elven ore used for illumination and walked at the very front. Noah, on the other hand, carried Leola and followed behind Aster, walking forward as well. Leola seemed to have stopped making a ruckus, but her pretty face was red as she curled up in Noah's arms. She muttered in disbelief as if she felt humiliated. I didn't expect that one day I would be taken care of by my opponent, and it's a man? Is there something wrong with your sentence? Noah was speechless. It's because he's a man that he should take care of a woman, right? Are there no gentlemanly men in the Dragon Duchy of Dorgonia? How would I know? Leola glared at Noah in embarrassment. Her face was still red. I've never been so close to a man before. Well, you're a Magus maiden who has to maintain a pure body and mind. I can understand that, Noah said hesitantly. But I'm worried about you Magus maidens when you get married in the future. Then that kind of thing. Leola didn't seem to have thought about this question. After a moment of silence, she said so. Of course it'll be arranged by the country, right? Yeah. Noah narrowed his eyes. So, if I really go to the Dragon Duchy of Dorgonia, you'll really marry me? Marry. Leola's mind started to wander. Her face was so red that it looked like it was boiling. Under the shame and anger, Leola struggled and kicked up a fuss again. She even started to speak incoherently. Who wants to marry a man? You're not going to marry a man. Noah was stunned. Do you want to marry a woman? Leola's tone was stifled. It was unknown if she felt embarrassed or if she had simply given up on herself, but she didn't know what to say. Can't I? I really don't know if it will work. Noah had the urge to cover his face. At least, I've never seen anyone do that around me. Just because others can't do it doesn't mean that I can't. She then realized that her words were too fake, and her face turned redder and redder. In short, put me down first. Fine. Noah rolled his eyes. You should have recovered some of your divine might. At the very least, you should have no problem walking, right? After saying that, Noah put Leola down. The moment her heels touched the ground, Leola immediately jumped away and distanced herself from Noah. She clutched her heart and panted heavily. My heart is beating so fast. Is this what happens when you get too close to a man? Noah waved his hand as though he didn't hear Leola's grumbling. He continued walking forward as he waved his hand. All right, hurry up and keep up. Don't blame me if you lose me. Ugh. Leola frowned. I feel like I can't let it go. Undoubtedly, I'm here to have a showdown with you. Despite saying that, Leola still obediently followed behind Noah and Aster. As the princess of the Dragon Dukedom of Drago Laguna, it wasn't that Leola didn't have any self-respect. However, her self-respect wasn't so strong that she felt that it was shameful to work together with her enemy. Leola only wanted to have a showdown with Noah when she was in perfect condition. Therefore, Leola wouldn't reject Noah's help because of her pride. At this moment, Aster, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped in his tracks. Noah and Leola also stopped and looked at Aster in confusion. In the next second, Noah's expression changed. He understood why Aster suddenly stopped. It was because there was a faint sound of footsteps in front of them. Leola seemed to have heard the footsteps as well, and her expression became serious. Woof! In front of them, a sound like a dog barking was heard. Noah's sharp senses allowed him to detect a familiar presence. Almost at the same time, in front of them, a voice full of caution and nervousness entered the ears of Noah, Aster, and Leola. Who's the person in front? Noah and Leola could feel that the owner of the voice seemed to have started to gather divine might energy. Therefore, Leola immediately put up her guard. Noah, on the other hand, quickly spoke. Is it you, Lindsley? Amidst the surprised voice, the gathering divine might energy suddenly stopped. Immediately, in front of them in the dark tunnel, the sound of quick footsteps could be heard. Not long after, a girl with luxurious light golden hair that reached her waist and a white wolf beside her ran over. She looked at Noah with eyes full of surprise. Noah! It was Lindsley. The white wolf was Lindsley's contracted spirit, the magical ice spirit Fenrir. The barking sound just now was made by Fenrir. It's really you, Lindsley. Noah was very surprised. Why are you here? I want to know too. Lindsley ran over with a face full of tears. When the competition started and I opened my eyes, I was already here. This is a maze. Not only can I not get out, but I can't even see the signal you sent. There's no way to carry out the plan you set. From Linsleigh's teary look, it could be seen that this girl was very anxious to get out after being teleported here. Even Fenrir whimpered in front of Aster as if it had been wronged. Aster, who was more or less indifferent to other humans, was not so repulsed by elves. He directly reached out and patted Fenrir's head, making Fenrir let out a sound of comfort. Undoubtedly it was an alpha wolf, but it acted like a dog. Even the sound just now sounded like a dog barking. It really made people speechless. Meeting a companion in an unexpected place made Noah's heart heave a sigh of relief. If he had not accidentally barged into this place, it was likely that Linsleigh would have been wandering in this underground maze until the end of the competition. Only Leola calmly analyzed the situation in front of her. To be able to meet a companion in this situation, it seems like luck is on your side. Linsleigh only noticed Leola's presence when she spoke. Looking at Leola, who was following behind Noah, Linley cried out in surprise. Why would the Dragon Duchess of Dragon Dukedom of Dragonia appear here? Since you and Noah Dole can appear here, why can't I appear here? Leola frowned. Besides, the chances of meeting each other in a place like this are extremely low to begin with. You should be asking why Noah Dole is here, right? That kind of thing. There will be plenty of time to ask in the future. Linsleigh looked at Noah and Leola suspiciously. What should be more surprising is why the two of you are moving together, right? It's a long story. Noah sighed. I can only say that man proposes but God disposes. It's one thing to fall into this underground maze, but I didn't think that even you would be transported here. I wonder if Claire, Linley, and Alice would also be transported to a place where we can't see the signal. What a mistake. To me, this situation is also a miscalculation. Leola said regretfully. Originally, I should be having an intense sword dance with you. Is this the so-called the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks? Looking at Leola's regretful expression, Linsleigh puffed up her cheeks and combed her hair, speaking in a dignified manner. Although I don't know what is going on, Your Excellency Duke Long, let me make it clear to you first. Noah is my roommate and companion. You are not allowed to have any ideas about him. Oh? You can't pretend you didn't hear that. Leola's gaze towards Linsleigh became sharp. In other words, if I want to fulfill my wish, I have to go through you first, right? Wish? Linsleigh was startled and immediately said. In any case, I won't allow you to take away what belongs to me. Interesting. Leola smiled coldly. I accept your challenge, Ice Spirit Envoy. Immediately, Linsleigh and Leola looked at each other with intense sparks bursting out of their eyes. Noah really wanted to tell these two girls. Their conversation was not even on the same channel. Chapter 1802. In this tense atmosphere, Linsleigh and Leola did not really fight in the end. Leola's god's might was still recovering, so she wasn't in her best condition. If she fought Linley in this condition, it would be very difficult. If she didn't pay a price, she wouldn't be able to win, so she gave up. Linsleigh, on the other hand, gave up on her hostility when she knew that Leola was not fully recovered. I am a noble, Linsleigh said matter-of-factly. Making a move in this situation is simply taking advantage of the situation. As a noble, doing such a thing will only lower your status. That sounded like something Linsleigh would say. Regarding this, Leola felt both agreement and non-committal. The Elven Sword Dance Festival is not a simple sacrificial ceremony. There are countless countries that want to win by hook or by crook. If you don't make a move against me when I am at my weakest, perhaps you will not be able to find a chance to defeat me easily in the future. I never thought of winning easily. Linsleigh looked straight at Leola, her eyes unusually firm. I came to the Elven Sword Dance Festival with the determination to win, even if I am covered in wounds. Is that so? Leola asked, puzzled. Then, if you want to get rid of me now, it should be the wisest thing to do, right? That matter is not the same as this matter. Linsleigh pursed her lips and said softly. If I win in this way, even if I achieve my wish in the end, I will not be happy, Malia will not be happy, and Eudia will not be happy. Is that so? Leola seemed to have noticed something and nodded. Then let's just say that I have offended you. Suddenly, an indescribable silence filled the surroundings. Noah, who had been watching the entire process of Linsleigh and Leola's confrontation, finally opened his mouth in annoyance. Are you done? If you are, then let's go. Lindsley and Leola's spirits were lifted as they braced themselves. Aster. Noah turned his head and looked at Aster, who was playing with Fenrir. Please continue to lead the way. Yes, master. Aster stopped very straightforwardly, but he did not continue forward. Instead, he placed his hand on Fenrir and with a small leap, he jumped onto Fenrir's back. You will be the steed from now on, magical ice elf. Woof! Fenrir barked like a dog again, his tail wagging vigorously as if he was not dissatisfied with this situation. Instead, he was very happy. Hey! Lindsley protested. Fenrir is not a steed. However, Aster did not care about Lindsley's protest and patted Fenrir's neck. Fenrir immediately lifted up his feet happily and walked forward. Lindsley stared blankly at this scene, and after a while she started to shout as if she was hopping mad. Fenrir! You are my contracted elf. Don't listen to others. Lindsley chased after him indignantly as she shouted these words. Noah and Leola laughed at almost the same time. Especially Noah, looking at the emotionless Aster who was riding on Fenrir's back as usual. His heart was somewhat happy. It seemed that Aster's condition was finally returning to normal, and he was not as listless as before. This was undoubtedly a good sign. Just as Noah was about to follow with a trace of joy, suddenly, Noah felt a strong gaze on him. Noah's footsteps suddenly stopped, and he abruptly turned his head to look in the direction of the gaze. Unfortunately, before that, the gaze that was cast on Noah had completely disappeared. Thus, when Noah turned his head and looked in the direction of the gaze, what entered his eyes was the same as before, a passageway surrounded by stone walls. Noah's strange behavior attracted Leola's attention. What's wrong? Leola followed Noah's gaze and looked behind. Did you discover something? Noah's eyes flickered slightly, and soon after, he shook his head. No, it's nothing, it's probably just my imagination. After saying that, Noah directly lifted his feet and walked forward. Although Leola was still somewhat puzzled, she did not say anything and followed him. The group of figures gradually began to move further away. The dim passageway once again regained its silence. At a corner of the passageway, a petite figure silently appeared there, watching Noah's group gradually moving further away in silence. Clear footsteps sounded again in the dim passageway. However, this time the number of footsteps had increased slightly, causing the atmosphere to become livelier. Aster, who was sitting on Fenrir, seemed to be patting his neck to make his mount move in the direction he pointed. It seemed like this was not the first time he used this method to move, which made Noah a little curious. Aster, could it be that you used to have a personal mount? As the strongest sword spirit that even the Elven King was wary of, Noah had reason to believe that Aster used to have his own subordinates like the 5 Elven Kings and the Dark Elven King. However, Aster denied it. I didn't have a personal mount in the past, and have always been alone. I didn't even join any of the factions between the 5 Elven Kings and the Dark Elven King. However, the elemental elves' world is very big, and sometimes a means of transportation is needed when traveling aimlessly. I have ample experience in this aspect. In other words, Aster had always been traveling in the elemental elves' world as he pleased. Once he was tired, he would simply grab a mount and use it as a means of transportation? Should it really be said that he was the strongest sword spirit? I know that Aster is very powerful. Lindley seemed to be somewhat indignant. But my Fenrir is not a mount, but a noble white wolf. Why would it fall to the point of being a means of transportation for others? Give up, Ice Elven Ambassador. Leola said faintly. There is also a difference in level between elves. Although your Ice Elven is a rare high-level elf, it is not strange for it to submit to the highest level of humanoid elves. That is the most basic form of respect to a higher-level being. Ugh. Lindley couldn't let it go. It's not that I don't understand, but it still feels very complicated. While speaking, Aster suddenly pointed to the front. The exit is here. The group suddenly stopped in their tracks. However, there was no exit in front of them, only a stone wall. A stone wall with a totem carved on it. Aster got down from Fenrir and walked in front of the stone wall. Just like in the sacrificial hall, he placed his hand on the stone wall. Clank! The totem carved on the stone wall suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Squeak! With a sound that sounded like an ancient door opening with great difficulty, The stone wall suddenly split into two and slowly opened. Behind the open stone wall, there was a flight of stairs that continued upward. Looking at the flight of stairs, Linley revealed a look of joy, and Leola's expression also relaxed. "We can finally return to the surface," Linley quickly said to Noah. "Let's hurry up and get out." However, Noah didn't respond and still stood in place. "Noah?" Linley was stunned. Noah fell into silence, and after a while, he suddenly spoke. "Okay, you have been following us for so long, you should come out now, right?" This sentence completely changed the atmosphere in the air. Linley and Leola were both stunned at first, then seemed to understand something, and their expressions gradually became serious. In front, Aster also turned his head and looked in a direction. Even Fenrir seemed to have sensed something as it bared its fangs at the dim passageway. Under such circumstances, Noah slowly turned around and looked forward. "What? You don't plan to come out? Do you want me to ask you to come out?" Everyone suddenly went silent. Everyone silently looked forward, and their bodies began to emit some divine aura. In the next second, a young voice suddenly sounded. Sure enough, we were discovered? Accompanied by such a voice, a petite figure walked out from the dark passage ahead. Chapter 1803. It was a young girl with long blue hair that was as clear as water. She was wearing a witch costume with strange patterns embroidered on it. The young lady's bangs were cut in front of her forehead. Her eyes seemed to have different shades of green, like rippling lake water. Her figure was rather petite, and her age was even younger than Aster's. However, there was an indescribable cuteness about her. Looking at the petite girl slowly walking out from the dim passageway, everyone was stunned, because no one thought that the person hiding in the side would be such a young girl. Furthermore, the witch's attire that the girl was wearing was not the uniform of any of the four teams: Fairy's Tale, Purgatory Apostles, Saint Spirit Knights, or Dragon Emperor Knights. In other words, she wasn't a participant of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. But, if she wasn't a participant of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, then how did she enter the abandoned city? After the abandoned city became the venue for the finals, the House of God set up a barrier around the abandoned city. No one could enter or leave freely, and even the contestants could not leave the barrier. They could only rely on the magic stones they carried with them to return to the city through the teleportation magic. Therefore, it was impossible for others to enter this place. Just as Noah was in a daze, Aster pulled on Noah's sleeve. "Master!" Aster stared straight at the girl. "That's not a human elf, but a humanoid elf." "A humanoid elf?" Linley and Leola were both surprised. Noah was also surprised, but at the same time he felt relieved. No wonder she could appear in the abandoned city even though she wasn't a participant. So she was an elf. Who would have thought that in this abandoned city full of useless elves, there would be a humanoid elf of the highest rank residing in the underground maze? It was too surprising. The elven girl seemed to have noticed that Aster was also a humanoid elf of the highest rank. After glancing at Aster, she raised her crystal-clear eyes and said, "I don't mean to offend you. It's just that there haven't been any humans or elves here for many years, so I followed behind you to observe." Undoubtedly, her appearance was very young, and her voice was very cute. However, there was a sense of maturity in her tone, which made people realize that this elven girl was extraordinary. Of course, the difference between an elf's appearance and their actual age was very big. Take Aster for example. Her appearance was that of an underage girl, but she had lived for thousands of years. She was much older than Noah, who was born with the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old, but had lived for less than 10 years. Who would have thought that there would be a rare humanoid elf here? Leola slightly lowered her head as a sign of respect. "I apologize for trespassing into your territory." Linsley was just like Leola, sitting upright and serious. She lowered her head slightly and bowed to the elven girl. This was the etiquette that which G had to show in front of high-ranking spirits. After all, many high-ranking elves were difficult to communicate with, and their tempers were also very strange. If they weren't treated well, it would be normal for one or two cities to be destroyed when these high-ranking elves caused a ruckus. For this reason, one of the compulsory courses for which G was to learn how to communicate with elves, and even how to appease the violent and furious elves. However, this elven girl didn't seem to be as hard to please as the other high-ranking elves. She shook her head at everyone. There's no need to apologize. I'm just imprisoned here and can't get out. Therefore, this isn't my territory. Imprisoned? Everyone was stunned. That's right. The elven girl nodded slightly. Some kind of seal has been placed on my body. Right now, this body of mine doesn't have any energy or memories of the past. I can't even leave this underground maze. I've been imprisoned here for 3 years. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Under such circumstances, the elven girl continued to speak. Therefore, you don't have to be wary of me. I don't have the ability to affect you at all, and there's no need to apologize. Although I've lived here for a few years, I've never treated this place as my territory. I have no reason to blame you for trespassing. You can rest assured. Is that so? Linley couldn't help but ask. In other words, Miss Elven can't leave this place and has been living here without any memories? Yes, the elven girl said expressionlessly. Fortunately, elves don't need to eat or drink. Even if there's nothing here, I can still live here. But this is the remains of a battlefield from a long time ago. The only ones living here are elves who are like the incarnation of resentment. Even if there are other elves living here, I reckon that they are magical elves whose brain structures are completely incomprehensible. Judging from your appearance, you don't seem to belong to either of these two types of elves. In this abandoned city, you're clearly the only normal elf. Don't you feel bored living in a place like this? It's all right. The elven girl shook her head and said, I'm already used to it. Linley and Leola didn't know what to say. Their expressions became complicated. Even Noah began to frown. He felt a little uncomfortable. After all, it was too pitiful to be imprisoned in a place where even ordinary elves wouldn't want to live after losing their memories and powers. It wasn't that Noah was overflowing with sympathy. Instead, it was because the elven girl's experience reminded him of himself. After all, when Noah was born with the appearance and intelligence of a 10-year-old, he was also in a state where he didn't have any memories or powers, just like the elven girl before him. The difference was that Noah was discovered and adopted by Makarov, while the elven girl had to live in this godforsaken place for 3 whole years. Perhaps one wouldn't be able to understand this feeling if they didn't experience it for themselves. And even if they didn't experience it, Noah understood it. If it were an ordinary person in this situation, perhaps 3 years would be enough to drive them crazy. I just wanted to watch you leave quietly, but since I've been discovered, there's nothing I can do. The elven girl pointed at the stairs behind Noah's group. But since you've found the exit, you can return to the surface by following that. Let's part ways here. The elven girl turned around and was about to leave. Wait a minute, Linley said almost immediately. Then she looked at Noah and begged. Hey Noah, do you have any way to break the seal on this elven girl? Seal? Noah hesitated for a moment and asked. If it's just a seal with Aster's strength, he should be able to break it, right? However, Aster suddenly refuted Noah's words. No, the seal on this mysterious elf isn't weaker than mine. It can't be broken by brute force. Not weaker than yours. Noah was stunned. Doesn't that mean? That should be right. Aster said calmly. If the seal on this mysterious elf was put on by someone else, then this person might be the Elf King. Elven King? Linley and Leola jumped up in shock. Even the elven girl didn't seem to think of this. She was stunned. If you want to break the seal on her, you can only follow the unsealing method. Aster raised his head and looked at Noah. Perhaps Fayanna can use the unsealing ritual to break the seal on her body. If you want to break the seal with brute force, you have to summon back your full strength. Noah frowned deeply. Indeed, if he had the authority, he could use the power of the Dragon Emperor avatar and use brute force to break the seal on the elven girl. However, Noah didn't have the authority now. At this moment, Aster changed the topic. Of course, there's another way. Chapter 1804. The sky gradually darkened. With the arrival of night, some shadows began to move in the originally lifeless abandoned city. It wasn't just in the abandoned capital. Even in the night sky where there was no starlight, only a crescent moon, there were black shadows flashing past. Some of them even collided with each other, entangling with each other as if they were in the middle of a battle. Hiding under the broken wall, Claire, Fayanna, and Alice watched the shadows colliding fiercely in the sky. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. That seems to be magical fairies, right? Alice asked nervously. And almost all of them are magical fairies. Undoubtedly, during the day we can't even sense the aura of a single fairy, but at night, there are actually so many magical fairies. Fianna complained inwardly. Could it be that all the people living in this abandoned city are magical fairies? That's not strange, right? Claire smacked her lips. Apart from magical fairies whose brain structure can't be analyzed, what other fairies would be willing to live in this kind of place? Claire, Fianna, and Alice didn't know that there was such a thing as a crippled elf in this abandoned city. There didn't seem to be any useless fairies living in this area. So the group of girls hiding here waiting for Linley didn't know that there were a large number of useless fairies roaming about in the abandoned city. However, looking at the magical fairies that were constantly intertwining in the air, the group of girls was also terrified. If they were discovered by those fairies who had no sense of reason and only attacked all living things, then the three girls would definitely be attacked by a large number of fairies, right? That wouldn't be any better than being surrounded by an army of useless fairies. No, from a certain point of view, magical fairies were much more difficult to deal with than useless fairies. Although useless fairies could steal the power of fairies and fairies, they couldn't withstand a single blow, so there were still ways to deal with them. However, magical fairies weren't so easy to deal with. The proof was that in the next second, Alice suddenly opened her eyes wide and pointed in a direction. Look over there. Claire and Fianna subconsciously looked in the direction Alice was pointing, and then their eyes widened as well. On the other side of the sky, a huge wyvern flew over and arrived in the air above the group of magical fairies who were fighting fiercely. Roar, 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 roar. Amidst the deafening roars, the huge wyvern barged into the battlefield and tore apart the magical fairies. The screams of the magical fairies reverberated in the air. That brutal scene made the faces of all the young girls turn pale. That's a demon god-level magical fairy? Fianna lowered her voice with fear. There are demon god-level magical fairies in this abandoned city? Heavens! Claire's heart palpitated. If we're discovered by those magical fairies, we're dead. After all, in a situation where mythical-level elves almost never appeared in the human world, demon god-level elves were classified as the strongest elves that posed the most threat to humans. Even Ace Commander-level elven users like Leola and Luminalise couldn't take on a demon god-level elf in a one-on-one battle. A legion of elite elven knights numbering in the hundreds, or even thousands, would be required to take down an elf of this level. According to what Claire, Fianna, and Alice knew, only Greywas, who was known as the strongest elf on the continent, could defeat a demon god-level elf single-handedly. Therefore, if Claire, Fianna, and Alice's group were to face a demon god-level fairy, they would definitely become a feast for the other party. Only Noah and Liena Subble can deal with such a monster alone, right? Alice's palms began to sweat. We can't face such a monster. Do you even need to ask? Fianna said angrily. Against a demon god-level magical fairy we can only run. Really, why are we performing the fairy sword dance ritual in such a dangerous place? I really want to leave this place as soon as possible. Claire complained. What is Linley doing? Why isn't she here yet? In order to wait for Linley, the group of girls waited from day to night. If they continued to wait like this, they would have to set up a tent here. However, if they set up a tent here and were discovered by the night fairies, it would definitely be disastrous. If it was possible, the girls really wanted to quickly move to a more remote building so that they could rest at ease. Moreover, we don't know how Noah is doing. Claire sighed. Is it that tiring on the first day of the competition? We don't need to worry about Noah. The important thing is why Linley still hasn't arrived. Fianna seemed to have calmed down and hesitated for a moment before saying this. Could it be that she encountered some kind of situation? That's the only way. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't be this slow. Alice frowned. There is only one thing for sure, and that is that continuing to wait is definitely not a good idea. Alice is right. Claire nodded. We can't keep waiting like this. Otherwise, it would be meaningless for us to gather here. Let's wait until dawn. If Linley still hasn't arrived by then we have to take action. However, at this moment, a playful voice suddenly sounded. Before that, let's ask the big sisters to do Mauya a favor. The sudden sound caused Claire, Linley, and Alice's group to tremble. They tensed up and turned around, looking towards the source of the sound. At the other end of the street, a petite figure appeared in front of the group of young girls without them noticing. An innocent smile appeared on her young and tender face. But that smile made people feel a chill in their hearts. "It's you?" Claire said solemnly. "You are the expert in purgatory apostle, who specializes in controlling military fairies, right? Big sister, do you know Maoya?" Maoya tilted her head and shrugged. "But Maoya doesn't know your names. But it doesn't matter, Maoya isn't interested in you. If you honestly answer Maoya's question, then Maoya won't kill you." "Kill us?" Fianna said in shock. "Are you kidding? The elven sword dance ritual doesn't allow killing fairies. Maoya doesn't care about that." Maoya puffed up her cheeks. "If Maoya says she will kill you, then she will kill you. She doesn't care about the elven sword dance ritual. Or do the big sisters think that Maoya can't kill you?" Claire, Fianna, and Alice all felt a chill run down their spines. Although Maoya's words sounded like a child holding a party, the girls believed her without any reason. If this girl really wanted to kill someone, she wouldn't hesitate at all. She was a person who could kill without batting an eyelid. She even took killing for granted. Realizing this, the girls felt a chill in their hearts. At this moment, Alice's expression froze, and she suddenly shouted, "Watch out!" Almost as soon as Alice's voice fell, Claire pounced on Fianna, who didn't even have time to react. Together with Alice, Claire fell to the side in a sorry state. Bang! The ground where the group of girls was standing suddenly exploded. A vine covered with countless sharp thorns sprang out of the ground without any warning. It was like a thick and ferocious long whip. While twisting its body, it soared into the sky and appeared in this space. Before the girls got up from the ground after dodging the attack of the vine, a calm voice sounded. "You dodged it? Seems that you have some skills." While saying this, an elfy girl with sharp ears slowly walked out from the shadow ahead and came to Maoya's side. It was none other than Lily.